I told you.
The Senate will come back to order. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move a call of the Senate.
The call has been moved. It has been sustained. Sergeants, please secure the entrances. Return members to the chamber, and Mr. Majors, would you please call the roll?
Senators Aguilar, Balmer, Baumgardner, Carroll, Cook, Crowder, Donovan, Garcia, Grantham, Guzman, Heath, Hill, Hodge, Holbert, John, Johnston, Jones, Kufalis, Kerr, Lambert, Lundberg, Marble, Martinez Jimenez, Martinez Jimenez, Merrifield, Neville, Newell, Newell, Roberts, Scheffel, Scott, Sonnenberg, Sonnenberg, Stedman, Todd, Ulibarri, Woods, Newell, Sonnenberg, Martinez Jimenez. Mr. President.
Here. We have 35 present. We have a quorum. I think that automatically raises the call. The distinguished gentleman from Colorado Springs, Senator Merrifield, owes $2. And on that note, the coat rule will be relaxed going forward. After the $2 is paid, the coat rule will be relaxed. It's getting expensive here, isn't it?
I'm ready. Okay.
Senator Jones has paid the fine, so the coat rule is relaxed and has obviously taken advantage of his own timing. And it is relaxed for the staff as well. Sergeants, if you need to get comfortable, we're going to be here a while. Committee reports.
April 23, 2015, Committee on Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy. After consideration of the merits, committee recommends the following. House Bill 1129 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. April 23, 2015, Committee on Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy. After consideration of the merits, committee recommends the following. House Bill 1132 be referred favorably to the Committee on Finance. April 23, 2015, Committee on Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy. After consideration of the merits, committee recommends the following. House Bill 1013 be amended as follows and also amended before the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. April 23, 2015, Committee on Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Energy. After consideration of the merits, committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 232 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. April 23, 2015, Committee on Health and Human Services. After consideration of the merits, committee recommends the following. House Bill 1267 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. April 23, 2015, Committee on Health and Human Services. After consideration of the merits, committee recommends the following. House Bill 1283 be referred to favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. April 23, 2015, Committee on Health and Human Services. After consideration of the merits, committee recommends the following. House Bill 1337 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
Senator Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move we re-resolve into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of the general order second reading of bills calendar.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The Senate will re-resolve into the Committee of the Whole for the consideration of general orders second reading of bills. Senator Roberts will take the chair.
The committee will come to order and the court rule is again relaxed. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Bill 257?
Senate Bill 257 by Senators Hill and Merrifield and Representatives Becker, Jay, and Singer concerning accountability in public schools.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Senate Bill 257 and the Education and the Appropriations Committee report.
Okay, thank you. To the Appropriations Committee report. To the Education Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Education Committee report included the following amendments. 1, each LEP must provide written information to parents regarding assessments, identifying federal, state, and local assessments, providing a calendar, and requiring information as to the purpose of the assessments and the results. Also, technical changes regarding testing of students with disabilities, clarifying that the student's IEP will specify whether the student takes the alternate state assessment or the regular. Also allows students to choose to take the writing portion of the ACT at the state's expense. That LEPs that participate in the pilot program may receive reimbursement expenses from the CDE. Creates a fund to reimburse the LEPs that participate in the Accountability and Assessment System pilot program, appropriates $18 million to the fund from the State Education Fund, and finally requires LEPs to adopt a policy allowing parents to choose to let their students to take the computerized portions of the assessment using paper and pencil. That is the Education Committee report.
Is there any further discussion to the Education Committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Education Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the report is adopted. Senator Merrifield.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I move the Appropriations Committee report, and that,
Go ahead, Senator Merrifield.
thank you, Madam Chair, that includes the appropriations clause, and it also removes the requirement that the department reimburse local education provider costs associated with the alternative accountability and assessment system. That amount was at $18 million. That, with the Appropriations Committee report, that removes that amount from the bill. With that, I ask for the approval of the Appropriations Committee report.
Is there any further discussion of the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the report is adopted. To the bill, Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I'd just like to walk you through this bill real quick. We've had a lot of conversation this year about assessments, about testing, about what the role is, how it mixes with accountability, and what we're going to do about it. We've heard from every single one of our constituents their frustrations with testing. Sometimes too much, sometimes not accurate enough, sometimes the results don't come in time. And as you all know, we've had a lot of bills come through here, and I've really been honored to work with my fellow senator from Colorado Springs and bring you 257. 257, let me just walk through a couple of the provisions here, the high-level provisions of what we're working on, and then I'm sure we're going to have a robust discussion. First of all, we recognize that, and it's helpful to see, colleagues, that there's a set of assessments that we have, the Colorado Measure of Academic Standards. Then we have tests that are aligned to those standards. And then we have a schedule of testing to use those tests that we call our accountability system, and how that filters on down to measuring districts and principals and schools and teachers. And so the first step that we're doing here is right now on the books, by July 1st of 2018, and then every 6 years thereafter, we are supposed to review these Colorado academic standards. And we're going to move that up 2 years, recognizing there's some complaints, recognizing frustration with Common Core in many perspectives, to say we need to come and we need to do this the Colorado way. We need to take a Colorado approach, and so we're telling State Board here to review and revise our current academic standards on or before July 1st of 2016, and then we continue that every 6 years thereafter. The next big change we're making is to pull back on a significant portion of high school testing. Federal law requires right now that we test math and language arts in 3rd through 8th grade, and then once in high school. And so we are getting rid right now of 10th grade testing, of 11th grade testing, and in some cases 12th grade testing. We can talk more specifically on that, and bringing it back to the federal minimums here. The federal minimums are annual testing in math and language arts, 3rd through 8th grade, and then once in high school. And the high school, we're giving flexibility to local districts to decide how to do that, what time to do that, especially when it comes to math, recognizing different schools have different timing on their curriculum to make sure they can align up that one high school test with the timing of the curriculum that they're doing. We also maintain in there the ACT. The state will pay for the ACT, or curriculum-based achievement exam is how we describe it in here, but that will continue to happen at 11th grade. We're also requiring that local schools, local education providers let the state know when they are going to be testing and give them the opportunity to test. We've reduced it to the minimum here, but if they want to test an additional 2 grades in high school, they get to do that as well. And they'll do it at the state's cost, because we did hear testimony of districts who are doing this. They find it helpful, they do find it useful, and we are going to be paying for that for the districts that choose to do it. Next up, we direct the State Board to apply for a waiver of federal law, if necessary, to allow our local schools, our local districts, to do something other than the current contract with PARCC. If they want to do a test other than PARCC, whether it's Smarter Balance, whether it's ACT Aspire, you name it, we're giving them the opportunity to do that, and directing State Board and Department of Education to apply for a waiver, if necessary, if we deem it necessary, to pursue that. Finally, we've heard some frustrations from a lot of parents about the assessments and the computerized assessment. So we're giving a paper and pencil option to all, at parents' request, to allow them to take their test using paper and pencil. What else?
Read. You want to say anything about read?
You know, colleagues, and then we'll go into a couple more details, and if there are more questions, obviously we've had some pretty robust discussion on this, but we've simplified READ Act, we've simplified for kids coming into school, streamlining that, making it easier to accomplish, and so we've streamlined that for earlier on. And then we have a good 20 plus pages of clarifying. Over the years, as we've done different piecemeal work, we have put assessments and testing in different parts of state law. So we're cleaning that up and appreciate the drafters' help on cleaning that up and putting all of our assessments language into one section of state law. With that, colleagues, I ask for your support on House Bill 257.
How about Senate Bill 257? Senator Hill.
I'd wait maybe to the end.
Hello, is there any other discussion on Senate Bill 257?
Go ahead.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me clarify, at this point, is it Madam Chair or Madam?
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair. Want to make sure we don't get fined. Members, this is a great milestone in our session, and I want to thank Senators Hill and Merrifield for being the prime co-sponsors on this bipartisan effort to listen to constituents, to listen to moms and dads, to parents all over this state and every one of our 35 Senate districts, and to work together, not shoulder off the minority and go do something that we want to do as the majority, but to work together. This effort has been described in the press through the past several weeks as some sort of unholy alliance. No. This is the very best of the legislative process because the people out there in Colorado elected us to come here and listen to them and represent them. And that's what Senate Bill 257 is. We have heard from parents in conservative Douglas County, and I mean this as a compliment with all respect, in liberal Boulder County. I hope that the folks in Boulder County don't take that the wrong way. But we've seen that in a diversity of school districts, in a diversity of communities. We have heard parents say, you're testing, you're assessing my son or daughter too often. You're interfering with their learning. And that's not something that we should ignore. If 257 becomes law, and I truly hope that it does, by one estimate that I've received, we will scale back the level of statewide assessments to 125% of that which the Owens administration supported when Governor Owens was downstairs. We're not scrapping anything. We're not laying waste to assessments. I want to know how my son's school is performing relative to other schools in the Douglas County School District. I would like to know how Douglas County compares to the other 177 school districts. I don't want to get rid of that data. I just want to have less interference with my son's ability to learn. And that's what 257 is. 257 also embraces competition. We have districts, and the folks in Mancos down in southwest Colorado, good on you. Thank you for being leaders at the local rural school district level. They've brought together a group of rural districts, and they want to go out and build their own assessment tool. And they've described that to me with great enthusiasm. And by the way, they're not asking us to pay for it for them. They want to go do that. But they've described it to me as an assessment tool that will work for rural districts. What does that mean? I don't know. But they have confidence in it. And that is a key for us to move forward. And Senate Bill 257 allows that to happen. Confidence at the local school board level. That, in my mind, means more confidence with teachers and principals at the local level. And that, in turn, means more confidence among parents. And that, in turn, means more confidence and participation from students. And that's what our problem is right now. We have students and parents saying no and opting out. And we've had Senate Bill 223 to talk about the opt-out issue. But this right here is responsible legislation because it allows those local districts to go out and form their own assessment tools, work together, share information, and in the long run, I believe that this is a great step. And again, credit to Senator Hill, our chairman, and to Senator, I used a name, the good senator from Colorado Springs, the two good senators from Colorado Springs, These gentlemen have been leaders on this issue, and we are going to have an ability to bring diverse communities together for them to build their own assessment tools if they want to, and instill more trust with parents and teachers and students. And that's what we need. We can't stand here and say, you must participate, or suggest to parents that they should just not pay attention. And I've talked before about parental apathy. We don't want that. That's one of the things that brought us to this place where we are today. Parents today, thank you, parents. They are paying more attention than I've ever seen before. And they're asking us to do this. Federal minimums, still be able to have the measures and metrics, spend less time, give them flexibility, give them choice. ACT Ascent, Aspire is one product. For districts that want to choose Park, it will stay there. I hope my district doesn't choose Park. I hope my district takes the opportunity to move forward either on its own or in a collaborative effort with other districts to build its own assessment tool that parents in Douglas County can say, yes, we believe in that. And when my son comes and says, I don't want to do that, I say, no, you're going to do that because I believe in it. I didn't say that this year. My wife didn't say that this year because we don't want my son, our son, to participate in Park. This is a great step forward. And I just so much appreciate the bipartisan effort on the Education Committee on this. This is good legislation. This is a bill that you can wrap your arms around. And best of all, this is a bill that you can go back to your district and look parents in the eye and say, we did the best we could. We didn't miss the opportunity to take it down as low as we possibly can without sabotaging, without crushing the assessments, without gutting the assessments, I think is, or the measures, the metrics, the report cards. Those will still be there. But Senate Bill 257 is the very best solution that we have this year, and I am proud to stand with the prime sponsors and ask for your support.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I, too, rise in support of Senate Bill 257. I know there's been a lot of good work and good discussion that has taken place. And I think one of the things we want to make very, very clear is that this is not a bill to get rid of accountability. This is not a bill to lessen holding students, teachers, schools accountable. And I think that's been kind of a misnomer in some of the reporting. Because what it is it's giving districts an opportunity to change some of those assessments that are more meaningful to students, more meaningful to teachers, more meaningful to parents, and ultimately garner a greater participation. When a student knows that there's going to be some viability in what they are being tested on, they're going to put forth more effort. They're going to have more of a buy-in. And I believe 257 is the opportunity for us to revisit and to be able to give districts that buy-in and that opportunity to say, this is something that is going to help us work together as parents, as teachers, as students to bring the most successful opportunities to learn what our kiddos actually know. And so with that, I stand in strong support with my friends who have already spoken and my colleagues on Senate Bill 257 to bring a more meaningful and a more appropriate level of testing and assessment to Colorado students. Thank you.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And colleagues, before we get to some further discussion, I'd like to move L025. It's a technical amendment just to clean up the appropriations clause.
Thank you. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read Amendment L025?
Amendment L025 to Senate Bill 257 by Senator Hill, amend the Appropriations Committee report
Senator
dated
Hill.
April.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And colleagues, this is a technical cleanup. The fiscal analyst had some changes based on some of the amendments that we passed. We moved through this pretty quickly last week, and so this is just a change. We're changing one number 5.5 million to 2.3 million in the appropriations clause. I ask for your support.
Okay, and Senator Hill, if you would just repeat, I move Amendment L025.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L025.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Merrifield.
Madam Chair, we have a senatorial 5.
Yes, we can have a senatorial 5. We'll come back to order. Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And we've looked over the figures, and indeed the amendment is necessary and accurate, and I would ask for your support.
Just wondering if the gazintas all work out. Would you like to explain to the rest of the body?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues,
Senator Hill.
as we worked through this, we did the appropriations clause last Friday morning. And as we've had a little bit more time to understand exactly the changes that we've made, we changed and updated our understanding of how much money we would save on getting rid of social studies testing here in Colorado. That's one of the changes that we've made. Currently, we do 3 tests, one in elementary, one in middle school, one in high school. By removing those as mandatory tests, we were saving some money, just not as much money as we had originally thought. So rather than the overall appropriation being a savings of $5.6 million, the overall appropriation now is going to be a savings of $2.3 million.
Is there any further discussion on L025? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of L025. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. Is there any further? Another amendment. Mr. Majors, would you please read Amendment L028?
Amendment L028 to Senate Bill 257.
Senator Hobart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L028.
Is there any discussion? Senator Hobart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. During the committee hearing, we had a series of amendments and discussion among committee members about extending the timeout clock. And right now, I believe with a bill that was passed last year by our esteemed colleague from Denver and a representative from Summit County, I believe, we extended the timeout clock because the data is changing. And there's a timeout for teacher assessment, and there's a timeout for district assessment. As the bill was introduced, 257 would extend the timeout clock for teachers for an additional 3 years, but not do that for districts. And in discussion with committee members, we've talked about an option of either doing 3 and 0 or 1 and 1. And L028 takes that second option, moves us to an extension of timeout of 1 year additional for both teachers and districts. And the reason that we're proposing this is that the data is changing. Now, L028 would also look at that 1 year extension and allow CDE to come back and tell us, is the new data that's being collected through the park assessment system, is it ready at the end of this year? If they say no, for whatever reason it's not ready, this wouldn't extend it more. It would just report it back to us on the Senate and House Education Committees, and CDE could come back and say, we have a problem. So the bill wouldn't automatically out in the future extend it even more. We're just trying to transition this from a 3-year timeout for teachers and 0 for districts and just make it equal 1 and 1. Try to also equalize the dates in the future because this data comes in and applies in some cases looking backwards, in some cases looking forwards, and we're trying to streamline how that process works. So I believe there has been adequate, more than adequate discussion among folks on the Education Committee, also different stakeholders in the lobby who have been paying attention to this. This was, again, something that the committee members had talked about and had agreement on, either 3 and 0 or 1 and 1, and L028 would take us to 1 and 1 districts and teachers. Ask for an aye vote.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I also ask for an aye vote. There was a great deal of discussion on both sides of the aisle with committee members and with advocates for the bill and people who have deep concern on the issue, and I think it will be fine, and I just want to make sure you were aware that that I support it and would urge you to do so as well.
Is there any further discussion on L028? Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With all due respect, this is a 6-page amendment on second reading that I've never seen before. I was on the committee, I haven't seen it. And so I might need a minute to talk to the drafter to understand what's in it. My first question for the sponsor is, so does this repeal the current section of the bill that has the 1-year prohibition on using data? And is it permissive or is it required? And is it permissive or required for all 3 years or just for 1 year? And does that apply to districts or to teachers or to schools or to districts, teachers, and schools altogether?
Is there any further discussion of L028? We'll have another senatorial 5. The Senate will come back to order. Is there further discussion of L028? Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to bring the conversation back to the well. There was a lot to digest in this 5-page amendment. And so I think we've identified now what the amendment does. It does a couple of things so folks should know.
Senator Johnston, can
Yes,
I,
ma'am.
I'm sorry, put you on pause just 1 second. For everybody else in the body, there is food off to in the hallway out this way. So hopefully you're listening still to Senator Johnston, but just bear in mind, I forgot to
Totally-
give that announcement. Senator Johnston, my
Totally
apologies.
unfair. So,
My
Madam Chair, I
apologies.
don't know which is a better strategy, to make everyone else leave while I'm talking or incentivize me to leave myself because there's food over there.
I'm trying to help you, Senator
Could be
Johnston.
both. Okay, so there are a couple things that it seems like this bill does that, or this amendment does that I would have questions or concerns about, and I think there may be other amendments coming to the amendment. The first, just so you know, folks, as we're talking about local control here, what this current proposal does is for the next 2 years, it prohibits, it makes illegal any local school district in the state and their local school board exercising their local control to decide to use assessment data in their teacher evaluation. So if you are Jefferson County right now, the practice you are doing would be illegal under this amendment. If you are Eagle County, if you are Poudre, if you are places that currently use student assessment data, you have the choice to or the choice not to under current law. This would prohibit that and make that local control illegal. The second thing this does is this will make sure that there are no school ratings for all 1,700 schools in the state of Colorado this fall. So no school in the state will get a performance rating this fall in any of your districts. What they'll do is they'll just get take whatever last season's schedule, take whatever last season's record was and roll it over to this year. So we'll just, whatever you did in 13, we'll say you did it again last year, regardless of whether you got a whole lot better or got a whole lot worse. And so it doesn't seem to me that that is helpful to parents around the state who want that information. And so I think those are the two major parts of the amendment that seem problematic to me. And so in its current form, I would ask for a no vote on Amendment 28.
Any further discussion on L028? Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I want to ask a question of the amendment sponsor, if I can. So what I just heard from the previous speaker is that it would give a roll forward score for the district of whatever they had achieved the previous year. Some school districts, including 2 in my district, are on the clock. So I'm trying to understand if they made gains or improvements based on the accountability regime that's currently in place, and they just roll forward to be standing in place. Is that the intention of the amendment? If they have made it out of the clock, then would they... I'm just trying to get some more information about how this would functionally work to understand the potential impact in my Senate district.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question, if this amendment, if you cannot use Park to evaluate districts, it would not be fair, if I'm interpreting this right, to use it to evaluate teachers. Is that the argument? Or I mean, am I concluding that correctly?
Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, colleagues. I haven't had a chance to fully process the 5-page amendment, but what I heard from the previous speaker was that the bill would roll forward the scores for the districts. I'm not talking specifically of individual teachers. So, for example, Adams 50 is a priority improvement district. It's gone from turnaround to priority improvement. If they make gains and academic success and they move off of the clock and go from priority improvement to the next level, it sounds like the way this amendment was drafted that gain would not be recognized and they would remain on the clock, potentially exposing them to takeover by the Colorado Department of Education. I'm trying to understand if that was the intention of the amendment, because it seems like it would penalize school districts that have attempted to correct course, especially when we're talking about student academic achievement.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it would delay the reporting of the results until the fall of 16. It would not, from my understanding, place them in jeopardy of moving into status where CSI would take over and and charter that neighborhood school. So I think that it is not as threatening maybe as it might appear to be, but it would delay the reporting results for that 16 report card and not the 15 report card.
Senator Donovan.
Further clarification on this discussion, and I'm specifically looking on page 4 of the 32, 35 lines, where it says, from the calculation and shall count the 2016-17 school year as if it were consecutive to the 2014-2015 school year. So while I just heard that the reporting would be delayed, the way that I read it, it says that it'll not be acknowledged. So my concern is that if I have a school that is in a priority improvement or a turnaround plan and has seen growth or improvement from the 15 to 16 school year, they will not get credit for this because this says the 15-16 school year disappears from the record. So if the amendment sponsor might be able to clarify that, I'd appreciate it.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, a district, if they get a higher assessment, they can appeal to CDE using their own local assessments, which I think would answer your concern. Or certainly would answer Senator Ulibarri's concern. The good senator from somewhere south of here.
Is there further discussion of L028? The motion before the body is the adoption of L028. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. There is another amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read L033?
Amendment L033 to Senate Bill 257 by Senator Hill. Amend the Hilbert floor amendment to Senate Bill 257.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, our goal in this legislation had always been to...
Senator Hill, could you back up and move L033, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L033.
Is there any discussion?
Colleagues, as I prematurely started to explain, the goal for this bill was always local control. Rather than having this one-size-fits-all policy, let's open it up from the bottom up. And so we've had some discussion about how we can use the current data from these state tests, from these state assessments. And we're changing the amendment we just passed to say we're not going to prohibit you from being able to use it. If a local district chooses to use these results, they may use those results. We're just making it clear that you may use them, but they are not required to use these results. So I ask for your support allowing Amendment 28 that we just put on to be a little bit more local control friendly.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this is an interesting situation where the co-prime asks for a no vote on the amendment that his co-prime has brought forward, but I'm asking for a no vote and on this amendment number 33.
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this makes an otherwise bad amendment a little bit better. If you are one of the folks who has Poudre or Eagle or Jefferson County in your district and the current practices of their district were just made illegal by the last amendment, this would at least allow them back the local control to make the decisions on how to use data if they wanted to. So I think this is a good amendment to an otherwise bad amendment. I'd ask for an aye vote.
Is there any? Senator Hobart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I join the good senator from Colorado Springs and ask for a no vote on L033. It was described by the previous speaker that that it would make illegal certain data for districts that are using it. I think illegal probably is not the best term to use. Those districts could use their local assessment, their growth data, but they would not use park data during this 1 year. If there is one thing that we have heard from parents, it is concern, skepticism for the data that is collected from park. So I do ask for a no vote, but would certainly respect the will of the body, a no vote on L033.
Is there any, Senator Hill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And colleagues, let me just, I want to read Amendment 28 and just what we're pulling out of here. The first page, lines 5 through 9 of Amendment 28 says that a local board shall not use the results of the state assessments. Colleagues, we've had a lot of different discussions in here over the years, but rarely do we come and tell local districts that they can't use the results of a test that they've administered, that the state has paid for, that we've gone down. So we're not saying they have to use it. It says very clearly they may use it, but they're not required to use it. This is purely about letting local districts make their own local decisions. So I renew my ask for your support of this, of making this a local decision, not us telling districts that they can't use data that they've collected.
Is there any further discussion of L033? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of L033. All those in division. A division has been called. Will all those in the chamber not entitled to vote please be seated? The motion before the body . All right, a division has been requested. Will all those in the chamber not entitled to vote please be seated? The motion before the body is the adoption of L033. All those in favor, please stand. Okay. Please be seated. All those opposed, please stand. The motion is adopted. Any further discussion on Senate Bill 257? Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't blame other members of the chamber who haven't been following this testing debate, because it's sort of like the weather, right? If you wait 5 minutes, don't worry, there's a new testing bill that's introduced, and each one of them is 50 pages, so you figure just wait for the next 50 pager to come out. So I understand if folks haven't gotten around to reading all of our various iterations, but I do think there are some things in this bill you probably ought to know about, and so I just want to walk you through a couple of them. I like a lot of the things that are in this bill. I actually think it's right on a lot of the things that the sponsors mentioned. It is a good step to reduce some of the testing at the high school level, is a good step to reducing testing at the elementary school level. But there are a couple things that are in here that I don't think folks know about that you should know about. When the sponsors talked about what our constituents asked us to do on this issue, here is what I think they did not ask us to do. They did not ask us to say, would you please pass legislation that would require more testing, would require that we spend more money on developing tests, and require that teachers spend more time away from their classroom working on writing tests. Those three things are what this bill does right now. And let me walk you through it. So unamended right now, a vote for 257 is a vote to say, I want to require more testing, I want to require we spend more money on testing, and I want to require that teachers spend more time administering and developing tests and not teaching. And if you don't agree with me, let me tell you why. First, on the more testing requirement. So there is in here a pilot. You maybe have heard talk about a pilot. And the pilot is to develop a new set of assessments. And what the sponsors have mentioned is, isn't this great because Mancos can develop their own test or Douglas County can develop their own test and let them do what they want, and that's great. That is not the way that a pilot works. The only way you get a waiver for a pilot, and I will read you the letter from the U.S. Department of Ed, is if your pilot is serving the purpose of developing your new statewide assessment. That means Mancos only gets the ability to build their new test if the Mancos test 3 years from now is going to be the test that all 800,000 kids in the state take. There is no allowance for a system that says, hey, Mancos do your own, Jeffco do your own, Dougco do your own, the rest of us will use the state test. So when you say we're going to do a pilot, that means you're going to have to develop a new set of tests, and those set of tests can only be developed if they're going to become the new mandatory statewide test. So what is the cost of that? Actually, before we get to cost, let me talk to you about the amount of testing. So to develop new tests, what does that look like? Well, New Hampshire is the one who has done this pilot. What does New Hampshire have? New Hampshire will have 3 to 5 years of double testing. I'm pretty sure no one said, come down to the Capitol and could you give us double testing, please? Well, to launch a new pilot, what you have to do is you have to keep your current set of tests. So New Hampshire is taking the current state tests, call them Park or Smart or Balanced, then they are developing the new pilot system. And for 2 years, you have to test both of them at the same time. And then after that, every 3 years, you still do both of them. So that's 5 years in which you are now double testing. You're doing your new set of assessments, and you're taking the old set of assessments. So unamended, this is a vote for double testing. Second question is, okay, if just adding testing time isn't enough for you, do you want to spend, say, $20 to $100 million more on developing a new set of tests? Because again, the myth here is that, you know what, we all got tests already. Why can't my 7th grade teacher in Mancos just use whatever she's doing for her English end of course exam as their test, and we'll be fine? Because that's not the way it works. What you have to do is develop a new test that can be used for a single, unified, standardized statewide system. That means your 7th grade teacher in Mancos is now designing an assessment to be used for all 800,000 kids statewide. Do you know the amount of time or money that costs? Well, the estimate is somewhere between $18 million on the short end, or from the Department of Education estimate, about $90 to $100 million on the tall end. Somehow the fiscal note on this bill disappeared in approps, but if you look at the Department of Ed's estimates on this, to build those new sets of assessments will cost you $20 to $100 million. So a yes vote on this bill unamended is to spend another $20 to $100 million on developing new assessments. Third part is, okay, who's going to develop those assessments? Well, this bill doesn't call for psychometricians or curriculum experts or professors who have done assessment design to build those. This calls for local districts to build them. That means teachers and principals. And so I guess now on third period, during her planning period, Ms. Smith is going to be developing the new statewide third grade assessment. Unless you have money in here, which there is not, to pay someone else to develop it, how you are going to do that is not allocated in this bill. And so I think there are some good things here. Without those changes, your yes vote would be a vote for more time on testing, more money spent on testing, more teacher time spent away from the classroom. I don't think that's what we were after. But I like the good parts of this bill, so I'm willing to help try to amend it to fix it. So let me start by introducing Amendment 27.
There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read L 027?
Amendment L 027 to Senate Bill 257 by
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this Amendment 27 is very simple. It pulls out the pilot program that is in the district, that is in the bill, I'm sorry. The pilot program, which I think folks have misunderstood to believe any district choose your own test and go forward, but in reality requires any district that wants to choose this test to develop a new statewide test, which in places like New Hampshire has taken about 4 years. And so this is what's going to require, and this is what's going to require 5 years of double testing while you generate growth and then you generate benchmarking scores. And what's going to require $20 to $90 million to do that. And so I would ask for an aye vote on Amendment 27 as a way to avoid us spending more time on testing, more money on testing, and more teachers away from their classroom.
Is there any further discussion on L027? Senator Hobart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do want to respect the good senator from Denver and his work on measuring and collecting data and assessments and accountability. But 257 was is a bipartisan effort that listens to parents. We are looking to create more flexibility for districts, more choice in the short term, at least between Park and the product, for instance, ACT Aspire. We realize that the data will change in the short term. We've just talked about the timeout period to give districts and teachers more time to adapt to that. But again, we are attempting to respond in a bipartisan way to the feedback that we've received from the people we work for, the voters, the parents, the taxpayers of the state of Colorado. And they have asked for a way out of Park. Many would like to get away from Common Core. The good senator from Denver mentioned New Hampshire. I think that's a good model. One statewide assessment in grade school, once in middle school, once in high school. And 257 is our first step toward developing that system, like New Hampshire, of local assessments, choice, competition. I think that's a good word. And I just want to say thank you to those who are signed on to 257, because this is, again, is not a party, a majority forcing its will on the state. This is bipartisan work. This is the majority of our Senate Education Committee working together and listening to the people of Colorado. I ask for a no vote on L027.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also ask for a no vote. The fact of the matter is nobody will be forcing any district to take a pilot, to create a pilot, if they don't wish to. These are decisions they've made themselves. They came asking for this opportunity. They know what's involved. If they don't want to do it, nobody's going to make them do it. If they want to do it, more power to them. So I would urge you to oppose this amendment.
Senator Todd.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I want us to kind of come back to the purpose of Senate Bill 257 is to collect information from students to help them have a buy-in to their own learning. It is holding them accountable for their own learning. It is to make sure that there is an understanding and a support for teachers and parents to work together in a collaborative manner to help those students succeed. So when we talk about it being more complicated and taking out, I'm sorry, I'm really speaking to the bill, not the amendment. So don't disregard what I've said, but I will, I'll come back to the bill again, but I'm sorry, I wasn't meaning to speak to the amendment, I was speaking to the bill. I apologize for that.
Is there any further discussion on L027? Senator Johnston.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I would just renew my motion, but I would add, so it was mentioned twice that sponsors think that New Hampshire is a good model. I am holding right now in my hand the New Hampshire assessment schedule. Third grade, double assessment, both Smarter Balance, which is their version of their state assessment, and plus local performance assessments, the new local assessments. Fourth grade, double assessment. Sixth grade, double assessment. Seventh grade, double assessment. That's after 4 years of required assessment in all grades for both sets of standards. So if that is the model, then what you're looking at is a path forward of double assessment. And secondarily, here is the letter from the Department of Ed. This waiver is granted to New Hampshire based on the fact that it will move to a single statewide system in which all LEAs are administering the same assessment system to all students. There is no let 1,000 flowers bloom and everyone invent their own assessment. There is only this assessment or another uniform standardized assessment. The difference is we're going to spend more money to build this one, require teachers and principals to take their time away from classrooms to build it, and then we'll have to double test it to get there. So I would renew my ask for an aye vote on Amendment 27.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, we hear 1,000 times a day local control, and once again, this pilot is voluntary. The parents of the districts can make that decision. If there is extra testing and they don't want to do that, then they won't create a pilot. If they feel that is valuable for them, that the data that they're being forced to collect, that the tests they're being forced to take is not legitimate as far as they're concerned, and they want to create their own, they can make that decision. That's up to them. That's local control.
Any further? Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with all due respect, that's not how the waiver process works. The Department of Ed applies to the U.S. Department of Ed and says, we are piloting a new statewide assessment system. And there is 1 or 2 or 3 districts, in New Hampshire it was 3, this could be 150 in this bill, that are piloting the new assessment that we will use statewide. There's no such thing as a waiver to say we're going to let 80 districts try whatever they want to do on an assessment and we'll see how it goes. That's not the definition of a pilot, nor is it what's in the U.S. regs or the state regs on a pilot. A pilot is your new state assessment system that someone starts using first. So in order, by definition, what that will mean is someone is taking a new state-approved, state-requested, standardized assessment system that they're using first. I think that the intentions are solid here. I just don't think that the language actually does that. So I'd ask for an aye vote on 27.
Is there any further discussion on L027? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of L027. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it, and the amendment is lost. Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just think in good faith, the sponsors have worked so hard on this bill that it's only fair to do. I'd like to get to a yes on this bill, and so it's only fair to give them the respect to suggest the improvements that I think close that.
Senator Johnson, hold on just a second. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read L026?
Amendment L026, Senate Bill 257 by
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment 26 and ask for an aye vote. Amendment 26 what does one simple thing, which is we've heard a great deal about what it takes. That the sponsor said we don't want to dismantle the accountability system. We don't want to dismantle good data that parents get when they decide what schools to go to. And they certainly don't want to dismantle any meaningful information about high schools are performing. High schools where we are losing the dramatic amount of our students to dropouts. And what this does is this keeps in place the system we've had in Colorado for the last 15 years since Governor Romer and Owens, which was assessment, a 9th grade assessment that will allow us to benchmark how students are doing when they enter 9th grade and allow us to get growth measures from 8th to 9th and 9th to 10th. Keep in mind, this bill is already repealing all 11th and 12th grade assessments, which I've supported. What this does is it keeps in 9th and 10th, so you have some information about how your students are doing in high school. Absent this, you won't be able to have any meaningful statewide growth data on any high schools, which means if you're a 9th or 10th grade student who's trying to pick high schools, or a parent of a 9th and 10th grade student trying to pick a neighborhood to buy a house in, you won't have meaningful comparable data on how those high schools perform if you only have 1 year of entire high school data. So Amendment 26 restores that system we've spent 15 to 20 years building, and ask for an aye vote on 26.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this bill takes us to the federal minimums, and that was a compromise. I think there are many who would like to see no testing. In fact, I think we might have passed a bill like that. The parents, the students, the teachers who were rallying on the steps 3 times this year, hundreds of them in the rain, want less testing, not more. We're taking it down to just the bare minimums that the federal government requires us to administer. Why would we add more tests when we're being pleaded with, begged with, to cut back on the number of overwhelming and flood of tests that students are being required to take every year? I would oppose any amendment that increases the number of tests above the federal minimum. I would ask for a no on this amendment.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too ask for a no vote on L026. The parents of Colorado have asked us, no, let me retract that. They have demanded that we do the very best that we can. And when it comes to the frequency of assessments, and again, assessments, my opinion, assessments, these are not tests. Let's differentiate assessment from test. Test drives to my son's letter grade. Test gives my son fairly immediate response and measures his progress through a semester or a course. Assessment is more data collection. The results come back next fall. If my son has graduated high school or moved out of middle school and moved on to high school, he is not there to get this data. So let's not confuse test with assessment. Federal minimum, 3 through 8, once in high school, as the prior senator explained. The federal government has required these federal minimum assessment, or this federal minimum assessment schedule, 3 through 8th grade, once in high school. Now, there's something peculiar about Colorado that maybe people who are not on Education Committee aren't aware of. The federal government considers 9th grade as middle school. They say 3 through 8 because the federal government is saying the student who's in their last year of middle school, 9th grade in many states, it doesn't make sense to assess that student because when the data comes back, they're gone. They're not in middle school. And the federal government has recognized with that they're not asking us to assess in high school. The reason they cut it off in 8th grade is, again, in many states, maybe most states, 9th grade is the last year of middle school. In Colorado, it's the first year of high school. So let's look at what the federal government is requiring of states. The federal government is not requiring annual assessments in high school beyond the one time. And we can do that with the ACT or ACT Aspire, or if a district decides, Park, that's the flexibility of 257. So adding back in 9th grade, if this is optional for a district, okay. But if we make it a state requirement, we just failed to go as far as we possibly could. We've just failed the parents who are saying, do the best you can and reduce this footprint, this burden, this distraction, frankly, from my son or daughter's ability to learn. And there's good reason for us to adopt the federal minimums. We don't need to do more than the federal government is requiring just because we consider 9th grade high school. Just because we call high school a 4-year program does not mean that we need to go beyond federal minimums, and that's the reason I ask for a no vote on L026.
Is there any further discussion on L026? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of L026. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? No! The noes have it, and the amendment is lost.
I meant to say aye for the record.
There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read L031?
Amendment L031.
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm hoping the dinner is still left over there and I haven't been punished for my excessive talking. So I will move this more quickly because I know Sonnenberg is going to get at least 2 more plates before I get over there. This is my last amendment, which I'm sure makes you all happy. So finally is this bill also puts in place something that was never discussed, recommended, or part of the 1202 task force recommendations. I do think it's important to come back to the fact that this started with last year running a bill that asked a group of 20 civilians to spend a ton of time trying to solve a problem that frankly was too hard for us to solve. And they came out with a 14-to-1 near unanimous set of recommendations. And we disregarded a number of them in this bill, although we carried out a number of them, so I'll give them credit for that. But one of these that appeared out of nowhere is we created in this bill a 3-year timeout for accountability for teachers and schools. And I don't know why there is a reason for us to do that. We did a 1-year timeout last year because we were in a transition year where there was new data that would be coming in, and it wasn't yet confirmed when we would get it or how we would make the crosswalk from an old data to new data. That will be done as of this year. There's no call yet for us to see why we should offer a blanket 3-year timeout before we've even seen that data. So I would ask for an aye vote on Amendment 31 to keep the accountability system in place and remove this 3-year timeout.
Senator Johnston, I need you to move L031.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I move Amendment 31.
Is there any further discussion of L031? Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would ask for a no vote. The 1202 Commission, I think, is partly why we're here with 257, because there was so much distaste in the mouths of parents and teachers and students over the lack of really significant change in the 1202. So we've taken a good portion of 1202, and we've taken the recommendations of moms, students, teachers, parents across the state, and created a good compromise bill, and that is 257. So I would ask you to vote no on Amendment 31.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I, too, ask for a no vote on Amendment 31. The Amendment 28 that we addressed earlier actually amended this. So I think this is actually unnecessary. Don't know that the sponsor would want to withdraw it, but again, I ask for a no vote on 31.
Is there any further discussion on L031? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of L031. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. No. Shockingly, the noes have it, and the amendment fails. Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having fought the good fight, I will go eat dinner.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I cannot say often enough thank you to the senators who have their name on this bill. I can't say thank you enough to the parents throughout Colorado who have picked up the phone, gone to the computer and sent email, who've paid attention in their school districts. If there's one change that I've seen in my time in the legislature and even before, we look back to Senate Bill 191. We look back to when parents started to hear about Common Core and Park and these issues. But it's the moms and dads around Colorado who really deserve our thanks. The good senator from Fort Collins has done admirable work on this over the past several years and bringing moms together and even subtitling a bill after the moms. For all the moms and dads out there, thank you for what you've done to bring Senate Bill 257 to this point, and I just so proudly ask for an aye vote.
Senator Todd. Senator somebody. Senator, oh, there is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read Amendment L032?
Amendment L032, Senate Bill 257 by
Senator
Senate.
Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, this is something we discussed. We talked about the role of a timeout. We've talked about the implications that had. But this amendment says, yes, let's do it. Let's do a timeout for those districts as we try to figure out this new data. But for those districts that are already on the clock, not on the clock because of Park, not on the clock because of Common Core, but they've been on there for a while, they've been failing their students for a while, we can't move fast enough to make sure every single one of our kids has a quality education option. And so this says, yes, let's do the timeout, but if you've been on the clock, that clock doesn't reset, that we're going to maintain our accountability and make sure the pressure is on to get these kids high-quality education options.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Merrifield. Oh, Senator Hill, would you move L032?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment L032.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would oppose this amendment. a great deal of the frustration that people who are involved in education and people who are lovers of public education and people who have been teachers and students and parents who have been unfairly judged by an assessment system that is not legitimate, that is not fair, and that hundreds and thousands of teachers and parents and students have told us they are tired of it, they want to change. I think this is an opportunity for us to show good faith with our constituents and support the bill as it was introduced without this amendment. And I would oppose Amendment 32.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I rise in opposition to this amendment. I think there's the assumption, again, that learning won't take place, accountability won't continue unless we have this particular state assessment. It will continue because of the dedication of the teachers to work with these students, to continue to support and save their local schools. It will continue because of a commitment for excellence, with or without data, with or without this one specific assessment. I urge a no vote on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion on L032? Senator Hobart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just understanding the limited time we've had to look at the amendment, I'm concerned that this does take away the timeout the extension of the timeout, which exists currently because of legislation passed last year. I believe I voted for it in the House. We are looking at data that will change, and we're looking to provide an extra 1-year timeout relative to park data. So it looks to me like this might be a bit heavy-handed toward the timeout for districts. We do want those report cards. Those things can be based on local assessment results and improvement data. But what we've tried to do is say that the park data that parents are so concerned about, that the districts and the teachers would have that extra 1-year timeout as they have currently under law. And that bill, I can't help but remember, was sponsored by the good senator from Denver and the former chair of the House Education Committee, the representative from Summit County, who seemed to be fairly well versed in this subject. So with all due respect, I struggle to understand why extending what we have already done another year is somehow the wrong thing for districts and teachers that are operating under these conditions now. I ask for a no vote on 32.
Any further discussion of L032? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L032. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. The noes have it, and the amendment fails. To the bill.
Any more amendments?
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I appreciate your attention. I appreciate the discussion. It's a very conflictory issue. Some of us have some very passionate views about it on both sides. But as you know, and I've said many times, I was a teacher for 30 years. And you don't know, I bet, that I believe in testing. In fact, I gave tests every week to my students. Heck, teachers invented tests. But those tests were useful, and they were informative, but they weren't punitive and excessive, and they didn't take up 30% of my classroom time as we do spend on tests in Colorado today. So this flood of testing, this tsunami of testing, is drowning out the thrill of learning and the joy of teaching. Assessment should not be the goal of learning. The word assessment should not make students, teachers, and parents cringe. It should be a guide to the next steps in learning. This current testing regimen forces teachers to adhere to a narrow set of standards rather than address the personal needs of each student or foster their creativity. and it's turned students into inventory. Education reform has turned itself into an assault on education itself, and I like to say it's become an axis of eval. Thank you. Therefore, I beg you, I plead with you to do what your constituents, what the moms, the dads, the students, the teachers, the administrators wish, and cut back on the overload, the overwhelming flood of testing that is killing the joy out of public education. I'll just finish by quoting Diane Ravitch, who was George W. Bush's Assistant Secretary of Education, when she said, testing kids until they cry is a bad idea. It's educational malpractice. I agree with that. We can do something about it right now. I would urge your support and your yes vote on Senate Bill 257.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I, too, rise in support of Senate Bill 257 and very proud to have my name as a co-sponsor of this piece of legislation. I've been down here for 11 years and served on this Education Committee, both in the House and in the Senate. And we've been talking about assessment, so very, very long. I personally wish we would have spent half of that amount of time, effort, and money talking about intervention and helping students along the way. I believe we've had some very meaningful conversations down here this year, be it the workforce development, be it looking at alternatives and ways for students to be engaged in learning. But I think what we have finally come to with Senate Bill 257 is listening to teachers, parents, students, school boards, and community leaders who have said, enough is enough. We want to hold you accountable. We want meaningful data. We want students that are really engaged in what it is they're being assessed on and being able to show us what they've learned. I think that even before session began, I had so many conversations with whether it was rural districts, superintendents, school board members, teachers, as well as in the metro area, and all throughout the state of Colorado. And I kept hearing that same message, and it was relevancy. Relevancy. Not afraid of rigor. Continue the rigor, but make it relevant. And that is what I believe giving districts an opportunity to say, this is what works for us for accountability. This is how we will prove the accountability of student growth. Have faith in the work, the effort, and the commitment of those who are dedicating their lives to the education of our children in Colorado. Again, thank you very much to the main sponsors of Senate Bill 257, and I count it as an honor to be a co-sponsor of this important piece of legislation. Thank you.
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one closing thought. I think it's been a good conversation tonight. Again, I would reiterate, there is a lot of good in this bill, a lot of good work that has been done. I just don't think that when we set out to do this, what we set out to do was to create a bill that is going to expand testing time, expand the amount of money spent on testing, and expand the amount of classroom time that teachers lose to be writing assessments. And I think you owe it to yourselves, folks, to read this 50-page bill before you vote for it tomorrow, because in the name of good intentions, I think you will risk accomplishing the opposite, which is dramatically expanding the amount of state dollars spent on testing, requiring double testing at multiple grades, and taking teachers out of classrooms and having them sitting somewhere writing an assessment they don't need to spend time writing. So I hope there's a lot of good that will survive in this bill, but in its current form, I think it's bad policy for the state, and I'd encourage a no vote.
Is there any further discussion on Senate Bill 257? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And colleagues, appreciate the discussion. I ask for your support on Senate Bill 257. I agree with the previous speaker, the good senator from Denver, and ask you to read it. On the bright side, it's not quite 50 pages, because really once you get to about page about page 19, it's actually reenacting and cleaning up some of the language on assessments and testing we have in other areas of statute. So it is 18 or 19 pages. And this is one of the most important things we will do here this year. It's important because we can make changes when it comes to how we do regulations, how we do fees, how we do budgeting, how we allocate money. But when it comes to our children, when it comes to the 855,000 students in our K through 12 system, we don't get to go back and say, let's have a redo. I'd like to go back and do 9th grade again. I'd like to go back and do 3rd grade again. I'd like to go back and graduate again. We don't get to go back on those. And so this is one of the most important things we're going to do. And so I ask you to read it. We will probably have some more speechifying tomorrow, and so I'll save further comments for that. But please read it. Understand what it is we're doing, because every single one of our children here in Colorado depends upon us doing this correctly. I believe this is done correctly. I believe this is the avenue we have to strengthening local control, to expanding more options for our children going forward, and making sure we don't have a top-down, one-size-fits-all approach to how we measure success in education. I ask for your support.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 257. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill passes. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title of Senate Bill 267?
Senate Bill 267 by Senator Hill and Representative Hamner concerning the financing of public schools.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Seems like I've been up here recently. Madam Chair, I move Senate Bill 267 and the Education and Appropriations Committee reports.
To the Education Committee report.
Madam Chair, if you give me half a second here, I've got assessments.
There's just an appropriations. Senator Hill to the Appropriations Committee report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In appropriations, all we did was add an appropriations clause.
Okay, is there any further discussion of the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the Appropriations Committee report is adopted. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, please read L008.
Amendment L008 to Senate Bill 267 by Senator Stedman, Grantham, and Lambert.
Stedman, Grantham, and Lambert in some order. Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move Amendment L008. And colleagues, this is an amendment that actually we discussed in the Appropriations Committee on Friday morning. And what this amendment does is it implements a JBC staff recommendation that we repeal the provision in the school finance formula for the provision of minimum state aid. And actually, by making this repeal of the minimum state aid provision, we're going to reduce the fiscal impact of the bill and the appropriations that were just approved in the appropriation clause. We're going to reduce those by $600,000 and bring the appropriation down to the $25 million that the JBC included a placeholder in this year's budget for. And so this one brings us into balance in terms of what we were planning as far as general fund expenditures in the School Finance Act. Let me explain a moment about minimum state aid. We actually have had a provision in law that we haven't done it for the past couple years. That provision expires and it's coming back online. It's costing $600,000 to put it back online. And yet there's really some fundamental equity and fairness issues at stake, because the districts that get this minimum state aid are districts that have high assessed value and mill levy local share revenues, where actually most or all of their total program is funded from their mill levy, and they receive very little state aid equalization money. As a consequence of that, they also have not felt the brunt of the negative factor since we put that into the school finance formula several years ago, because the negative factor reduces state aid money goes to school districts. And so if you're a district that funds your total program totally on your local share and your mill levy, you've never had any state aid for us to cut through the negative factor. Those districts have been immune from the hardship of the negative factor. And yet, even though they're not getting the negative factor, they're scheduled now to get minimum state aid again. I think that doesn't make sense. I think we can bring this bit into balance and be a little more rational about this. I could spend more time talking about the theory behind minimum state aid, but I'll stop there and ask for an aye vote on this amendment from the Joint Budget Committee 008.
Senator Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also ask for an aye vote on the Senator's amendment. This was something that was discussed in the JBC. Because this rolled over so quickly into the Appropriations Committee after midnight work, hard work by the Education Committee, kind of caught us by surprise last Friday morning, and I'd ask for an aye vote to correct this particular issue.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I need a little bit more information, and that is there's this aggregate amount of $600,000, which doesn't sound like a very daunting number when you're looking at the multiple billions that go to school finance. However, how many districts are being affected by this, and therefore what sort of an impact does this have on them? I'd like to know before we cast the vote the actual impact. I'm thinking of the Estes Park school district that may be in that category. I'm sure there are others around the state, but are we talking about 5 districts? Are we talking about 2 districts? What does this mean spread out around the state?
Senator Stedman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And colleagues, we're talking about 8 districts. And primarily, these are districts that have very low pupil counts. They're rural, small school districts that have very high assessed valuation, primarily because of oil and gas assessed value producing wells. Cripple Creek is one of these, and in their case, it's a gold mine that has created the local property wealth that contributes to their local share. But in each of these, the provision of minimum state aid and actually this whole situation where you have school districts that have been held harmless from the negative factor because their local share funded their whole program tends to be these districts like I just described, where they have very few pupils, but a lot of property wealth, generally from oil and gas and other kinds of mining operations. It used to be, years ago, districts like Aspen and Telluride were in this category, but they've grown enough now in their enrollment counts that that's no longer the case. They still have the property wealth, but they have more kids that they're funding with that property wealth. But for some districts like Platte Valley or Prairie or Pawnee, and I think those are all in Weld and Logan counties, oil and gas producing areas, they have very few pupils and a lot of local share property wealth to fund them with. That's who it affects. No district is affected by more than $250,000, and that's the one that is affected by that amount has over 2,300 pupils in their district. So they're a larger district. You know, the smallish districts that have like Pawnee, less than 100 kids, this affects them by $9,000.
Is there any further discussion of L0? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I do want to say thank you to the JBC for the work they've done on this. This will have an overall $200,000 impact. I am concerned about the impact I have on Cripple Creek. We've had conversations on them. It's a very small district. I'm concerned on that front. Again, I do understand the broader economic and just clarifying picture of what we're doing in school finance here. So I just want to clarify, I'm concerned about the impacts this will have on Cripple Creek, and don't share the enthusiasm for this amendment that others might.
Is there any further discussion on Senator Holbert?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to thank the members of the JBC and do ask for an aye vote on L008. This This is a fix. The JBC, as I understand, agreed months ago to do this, and it's appropriate that we include this. Ask for an aye vote.
Any further discussions of L008? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of L008. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Okay, crickets. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. To the bill, Senator Johnston. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read L014?
Amendment L014 to Senate Bill 267 by Senators Johnston, Merrifield, Amendment Appropriations Committee Report dated April 17, 2015, page 1, strike lines 2 through 6,
Senator
and
Johnston.
substitute.
And please move it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We move Amendment 14.
Okay.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So this is an amendment we brought on committee, and so it'll be very familiar to the folks from Ed Committee. I see smiles already throughout the chamber. There's been a lot of conversation this session from both sides of the aisle about how important it is to meet our obligation to school funding and to try to decrease the negative factor, increase the amount of dollars going to schools. And the governor called at the beginning of the year for a $200 million increase to schools out of the state education fund. We've worked hard to increase the balance of the state ed fund over the course of the last 5 years. There were years in the lean years we were down to $10, $20 million in that reserve. We now have $300 million in the state ed fund this year. And so this calls to bring that balance down to 100 and to invest that additional $200 million of state ed fund dollars into schools. We acknowledge that is probably a one-time investment, but in talking to districts, they've said they know everything is one-time at this stage with this building based on where the budget is. And so we'd like to be able to get those dollars into local districts' hands where they can make the decisions on how to spend them, how to save them, how to use them. But we think this is an important step to funding schools and making sure we keep the state ed fund solvent, and this would do both of those. I respectfully ask for an aye vote and defer to my co-sponsor.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We just wanted to prove that the good senator from Denver and I have a lot in common that we agree with. So I definitely agree with this amendment. The state education fund is supposed to be used for purposes just like this. The fact that it have $300 million now, the fact that the superintendents, all but one, 174 superintendents agreed and begged with us to do this, makes me feel that it was the right thing to do, and I ask for your yes vote.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I'd like to walk you through why I would love to be able to say yes.
You can. It's really easy.
You know what? I can say yes. Yes, this is unfortunately a bad idea. Colleagues, it's true that the way we forecast this, we should end the year with around $300 million in the state education fund. And it's important to understand a little bit of the history here on the sweeps we've been doing. So we've had an artificially high balance into the state ed fund. And the trick we have legislatively is how do we have a sustainable drawdown of the state ed fund in a way that has long-term sustainability. First of all, let's make it clear. I think there's a hint that somehow we're not increasing education funding this year. The bill without the amendment is going to spend an extra $306 million on education this year. About a 5% increase, a 3.8% increase in per pupil funding for 855,391 exactly kids that we'll have next year. But it's important to understand we are spending far more out of the state ed fund this year and next year than we will be in ongoing years. So the drawdown plan that we have is to end next year with a balance of $100 million. And that's a sustainable ongoing balance. As you know, we have supplementals. These are forecasts. All forecasts are wrong. Sometimes they're useful. In this case, we need to have a bit of a cushion there. If we were to draw that all the way down this year, again, let me say this again. If we were to draw that all the way down to $100 million this year, which is what this amendment will do, then next year we would need $567 million out of the general fund just to maintain year over year that same level of funding. Already what we have in there is, again, next year we plan on drawing down the balance further to a sustainable level. Next year, based on current forecasts, we will need $357 million in new money out of the general fund. Again, $357 million in new money out of the general fund. And that assumes that we can start the year with this extra $200 million in the state ed fund and draw it down. So I appreciate what we're trying to do here. I believe, from a priority standpoint, we need to have higher levels of K through 12 funding. And we should be doing it earlier on in the year, and we should be carving out more money out of the general fund for education funding. However, this is not the path to do it, and will create a fiscal cliff in state ed fund for us next year. I ask for your no vote.
Senator Hobart.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to thank the good senator from Colorado Springs, the chairman of the Education Committee. He is in his zone when we start talking about these numbers. And again, I want to thank the sponsors of the bill, the bipartisan support that we have, because it is the best of what we can expect from the legislative branch of representative government. We are being responsible with what we're doing this year and looking forward to next year. And if we put too much, take too much out of the state ed fund this year and offer this extra funding now, we could very easily get into a situation that I hope to never be in. The negative factor was used before I came into the legislature, and as long as the people of Senate District 30 trust in me to have me here in the state Senate and do this job, I don't ever want the negative factor to be used again. I don't want to have to pile money onto that IOU. And if we're not careful with our allocation this year, even as our economy improves, we could raise that base too quickly and we could have too little in that state ed fund in the coming years, next year, the year after. We have to be very careful and very responsible about how we recover out of that great recession and that downturn. We've got to be very responsible. Senate Bill 267 does that, and with all due respect to the amendment's sponsor, we have to be very careful to not extend ourselves too far. I believe that's what L0, or the amendment would do. Ask for a no vote.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think, colleagues, I think it's important that we take a look at some numbers here. You know, we throw around a lot of terminology. The negative factor, whatever it might be. I think the key thing is that we know that we don't have probably as much money as we'd like to put to the education bill, but we're trying to show stewardship and be able to do what we need to do next year also and make sure we don't disappoint people. So when I take a look at Jefferson County, I believe this bill has done that. You know, in Jefferson County, we have a 3.78% increase in per pupil funding. That's $259 per person. It's approximately the same for Denver. I think it's about $250 something per student. So this bill does provide more to the counties and to the districts. And it also puts us in a position where we can show stewardship of our dollars and be able to continue that next year and see where the economy goes. So, thank you.
Senator Johnson. Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, a couple of points on the math. There are a couple of us that love this part of the debate, and we bored a lot of members of our committee with it. But there is. Long story short, yes, we had a couple of years where this legislature ran sweeps, which took any remaining dollars out of the general fund that were left over and put them in the state ed fund. That artificially inflated the number of dollars in the state ed fund beyond what used to be a very rote structure where 500 or 600 came in, 300 or 400 we spent, and then every year it replenished. So it does replenish every year. But to offset those sweeps also, the budget proposed balancing much more of the education funding on the state ed fund than on the general fund. So we compensated by overspending out of the state ed fund in these couple of years from general fund to spend down those sweeps. So there has always been coming this adjustment where the general fund will have to now pick up their share of the weight that state ed fund has disproportionately carried. So that is there regardless. But the key is these are one-time funds that are not intended to be recurring. We may continue to extend them if we choose to, but the commitment here is not a recurring expenditure. But what I think is also important about this is people may have seen this, as you've seen from the newspapers or from your own houses. Property taxes are rising, home evaluations are rising, and what that means is that the assessed value on these houses are going to increase and the property taxes are going to increase. So the current adjustment that we've seen on this is that the current long bill projects property tax rates to be at 7.8% growth. The most current metrics look like that growth will be about 11.8, which is much higher than what we expected, which means that's increased revenue in property tax base from local districts. That's up to around $70 million already of new dollars that would be coming in after this budget closes. Now, normally we do nothing, wait till that comes in, and then next year it ends up in the general fund and we all start fighting it over again. What we'd like to do is instead invest these dollars into education now, because school districts are going to make budget decisions in July and August and September. If they want to hire staff or offer programs, they can't offer them in the middle of January. What we'd like to do is commit those dollars now, knowing that those dollars will come as an initial support to the state ed fund. I'll also add on the reserve that we did the great work with the leadership of the JBC over the last couple of years of increasing the solvency of the state reserve, which I believe is now 6.5% is the state reserve. And so we increased in the recession the state reserve to make sure we had a backstop for the entire general fund. We have a state ed fund that's also a backstop for the education spending. We have two backstops already in place. It is not just raining, it is pouring right now in school districts across the state, and we're keeping $300 million in an extra reserve fund. This is the time to invest those, but to responsibly know we have a backstop to support it, and that includes not just the state ed fund balance, but also this new property tax adjustment. So I'd ask for an aye vote still on Amendment 14.
Is there any further discussion on L014? Senator Lambert.
Thank you. Members, betting our ed fund on property taxes is not a wise thing to do. We have seen one bubble on property taxes, on value of property over and over and over again, and even more problems are predicted for the next year.
Well, just think of it as being more of a salad.
Oops, did he stop talking?
I draw your attention to the governor's original budget proposal because the governor came up with this. Our JBC analysts did quite a bit of economic research on this, and we came to the conclusion that this is really not a sustainable plan. Yes, this is one-time money, but we need to draw this down so at least we have sort of a soft landing in the future as we do hope more general fund becomes available to backfill local education programs. But from the governor's budget request, he said, as we look beyond 15-16, the ability of the state general fund to protect the negative factor from rising above the 14-15 level of $894 million is uncertain. Under the current model and incorporating this proposal, the amount of new state general fund monies in FY 16-17 to keep the negative factor at the 14-15 level will be, the number that was mentioned before, $560 million. This currently, and members, please listen to this next sentence, this currently exceeds the expected total new general fund money available. These issues are illustrated in Appendix A if you want to take a look more at the governor's budget request. But the fact is, there is no general fund money to sustain that level next year if we expend all of this money out of the state ed fund. We need to go forward in a sustainable fashion. That's the only prudent thing to do, and I would ask a no vote on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion of Senator Hill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, it's important for us to recognize this conversation isn't about whether or not there's one-time money or whether there isn't one-time money. There's always one-time money, but let me walk you through what would happen if we actually did this. Next year, our goal is to hold the negative factor constant, right at about $855 million. So it's a slight drawdown from the $880 million we're looking at this year. In order to keep doing that, in order to keep that negative factor constant, we need $300 million this year as the ending balance in the state ed fund, so that next year we can continue to spend that down and keep the negative factor constant at $855 million. So if we were to spend this extra $200 million and say it's all one-time money, it's not as if we've got to say, well, next year we've got to just maintain it if we're going to keep the same level. No, the truth is, next year, without that money in the state ed fund, we would look at a potential $200 million increase in the negative factor. Because keeping the negative factor constant means that we have to end this year with $300 million. Now, remember, the reason for this is we've had an artificially high balance in the state ed fund. Every single year, 1/3 of 1%, based on Amendment 23, gets swept out of the general fund into the state ed fund. That will happen again next year. We need to add to that some of this beginning balance in order to maintain a constant negative factor going forward. So let me just reiterate, if you vote yes on this amendment, that is a vote to increase the negative factor in fiscal year 16-17. There is no way around it. This money is required to maintain a constant negative factor. So I'll say it one last time for my senator from Denver who wasn't paying attention. To spend this money as one-time money would mandate that we have an increase in the negative factor beginning in fiscal year 16-17. So I ask for your support against this. Let's maintain a constant negative factor ongoing.
Senator Johnston.
Thanks, Madam Chair. No, it wouldn't. To invest $200 million would increase the investment in K-12 and make those dollars available to local jurisdictions now to spend them. And it would require that the general fund pick up the obligation it has to funding education that it had previously before we cost shifted that burden to the state ed fund. We cost shifted that burden because the state ed fund had outsized deposits because of the sweeps. There are no more sweeps left in Tabor refund years, so there's no more reason to put extra reliance on the state ed fund. Yes, there's a correction to bring that from the state ed fund back to the general fund, but I would argue that's what we had to know we were doing when we relied on that overexpenditure of the state ed fund. So I do think this requires that the general fund retake the burden that is rightfully ours on funding K-12. But I think that this is the right step to allow these districts to decide, do they want to spend it now? Do they want to save it for later? Do they want to make incremental investments? But I think it will then be incumbent upon us next session, when I look forward to the chair of the Education Committee bringing the School Finance Act, to then prioritize that investment early in the year so that we know that we want to keep this commitment. I think that's doable if we prioritize it that way.
Is there any further discussion on L014? Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think basically what this comes down to is talking about the state education fund as a rainy day fund. This is a savings account specifically for education created by Amendment 23 about 15 years ago. It's a savings account to be used for a rainy day. So some statistics have been talked about as to how much increase there is already in Senate Bill 267, which is nice, but it does not address the negative factor. It does not address maybe to the tune of $25 million, but not nearly to the extent that's a tiny fraction of almost $900 million hole we have in what we owe our schools and our students in those schools. The $200 million we're talking about here is not going to drive open that negative factor next year. What it is going to do is to help close it this year. This year, and for the upcoming year, it's going to help drive that down. And in my county, in Jefferson County, that will be about $20 million. That will help my then first grader in his classroom, my then fifth grader in her classroom, and my then seventh grader in his classroom. That is money that will be available to be spent by our school districts on our students in schools right now. So if we're talking about a rainy day fund, I don't know when it could get much rainier. Sure, the economy has been improving, but there are other constitutional constraints which are making it impossible to close the gap on the negative factor. But this is one way. Let's go to the rainy day fund, which is the state education fund. Let's spend the money on our kids in schools right now.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I've been staying out of this debate because I'm not on the State Senate Education Committee, but there are times that I believe we all need to wade in on this debate and discussion. And this particular amendment before us, the good senator from Lakewood is quite correct that the State Education Fund is a rainy day fund. My ears kind of perked up because I started promoting that idea about a dozen years ago here, no, 13 years ago now, that we need to have that long-term savings account for those tough times when we really need it. But the amendment before us is spending it when the sun is shining rather than when the rain is falling, and not recognizing that once it's gone, it's gone. And I'll put it within this context as well. I find the terminology that's being used so liberally around here, negative factor, to be remarkably inaccurate to the facts. And it appears to me that the term is being very creatively used to project this expectation that somehow we have underfunded education because in previous legislative cycles we have had to face the reality that there are only so many dollars to be spent. And so the maximum amount possible was not possible. Therefore, the legislature determined that there are certain factors that could be used to adjust the overall funding so that it be within the limits of what was available. Well, that was the reality of what the funding was for that year. And yes, there was appropriate terminology to say that that was a negative factor, but that didn't then put in place this unrealistic expectation that the funding should make that up in later years. That's ridiculous. We couldn't do that. We certainly couldn't do it across the board for all funding mechanisms in the state. The people of Colorado would be paupered far beyond their ability to pay. I would beg that we take this terminology called negative factor and set it aside and live with the reality of what we can afford. The amendment before us today is spending more than we can afford. Let's get a grip with what we've got. Remember, this is the state of Colorado where Medicaid funding is going through the roof. We can't take unrealistic expectations for other areas of government, and concerning right now, it's Senate Bill 267, the School Finance Act, and somehow presume that we can spend far beyond our means. That's not realistic. No, if the State Education Fund is a rainy day fund, let's treat it as such and not spend it all at once here and now.
Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I urge an aye vote on L014 and want to address some of the comments that were made by the previous speaker. For some in this state, it is shining, the sun is out, but for others, including in my own Senate district, people can see all kinds of weather straight through the roofs of their schools. Why? Because we haven't adequately invested not just in the classroom resources, but everything else. And when we look at school finance, I want to make sure that those kids, even though the rain may literally be pouring on their head, that they have the best teachers, best resources, best ability to learn. And one thing stuck out to me from the previous speaker's comments. He said, well, we just don't have the money to spend. In fact, that belies the truth. There is over $300 million in the state ed fund. This is requesting $200 million of that be spent on education. To say that we don't have the dollars and we cannot spend them belies the basic accounting truth that we have $200 million to invest in our most precious resource, which is our children, and their education, so they have every single opportunity to succeed in this country and in this state. This is a modest investment and one that is incredibly necessary for our state, that we invest in our schools so every kid, even if the rain is pouring down on their head, has the tools in front of them to learn.
Is there any further discussion on L014? Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to respectfully disagree with the good senator from Loveland on a couple of issues. I was here when we debated the negative factor, and I fought passionately against it, was very disappointed that we did that, but I remember that we promised to make up for it. We promised teachers and administrators in districts and school boards that we would make up for that negative factor. Instead, we began with a negative factor of $130 million. The next year was $381 million. Then it was $774 million. Then it was $1 billion. And the next year after that, it was $1 billion again. And this last year, we were down to $880. We have $300 million in the state education fund that cannot be spent on Medicaid. It is specifically must be spent on education. I say let's live up to our promises, buy down the negative factor, spend the money on at-risk children. Just very quickly, one-time funds, the districts and the superintendents would be thrilled to get one-time funds. From the Eastern Plains, they would unfreeze their salary, the superintendent told me. From the rural Western Slope, they would upgrade their buses. From the Western Slope again, they would pay for breakfast after the bell that we mandated. From the Northwest Mountains, the superintendent said they would open the library all day they've had closed for 2 hours a day every day. And from the southeast part of the state, they told me, the superintendent, that they would save teaching positions they're going to have to lay off this year. This is a legitimate use of the state education fund, and I would urge you to say yes to this amendment.
Is there any further discussion on L014? Senator Hill.
Again, colleagues, just to reiterate, we're not debating whether or not the money is here. We're debating whether or not what the impact will be next year and the years thereafter. This is a vote, a yes, for $200 million this year, which means a $200 million increase in the negative fund, in the negative factor next year. If you would like to go back to your districts and say you helped increase the negative factor, vote yes. Hence, I'm genuinely interested in all of your political careers, so I encourage you to vote no.
Is there any further discussion on L014? Senator Johnston.
I am genuinely interested in all of the children in your district, so I encourage you to vote yes.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of L014. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. No. The noes have it, and the amendment fails. Senator Johnston. Mr. Majors, there is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read L015?
Seriously.
Amendment L015 to Senate Bill 2.
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We move Amendment 15. And the other ones were hard. This is an easy one, which is no new money, no new investment, but it is a chance to listen to your districts and listen to local control, which is 174 superintendents across the state wrote us a letter and said, whatever amount of funding you put into education, we don't care if it's 1 million, 200 million, or 300 million, what we would ask you to do, this was a coalition of rural districts, urban, suburban, who said we would ask you to make a reasonable appropriation of that, to split it, 75% that goes across the board to all districts, and 25% that target students that are at risk, that have additional needs. And so this amendment simply takes the $25 million that's in this bill and says, let's actually allocate it the way the district's asked. And That is to recognize that whether you are in Cherry Creek or you're in El Paso County or you're in Bent County, there are certain additional needs to educating a child that is additionally that has low income. And this recognizes that and provides an across-the-board allocation. It's a flat fee, and so it does not have the concentration factor, which only about 5 of us know about or care about, but it does not have the concentration factor some districts oppose. And so even this allocation was already a compromise between poor districts that would have gotten more and urban districts would have, or the suburban districts would have gotten less. So this is a compromise all the practitioners in the state reached. They asked us to allocate it equitably this way. I'd ask for an aye vote on 15, and I'll turn it over to my co-sponsor.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I agree with my co-sponsor. This is a legitimate way. We're not searching for other monies now. This is already part of the School Finance Act. It's just we're asking for it be split in the way that the 174 superintendents have requested. And I enjoyed Kumbaya with the good senator from Denver so much that I'm also supporting this bill.
Senator Guzman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am here to support this bill. I would like to see more money going in to high-risk students. Just wanted to say a little bit about what a high-risk student goes through. This is, I'm going to read just a paragraph from a letter that a student from Mapleton School District wrote as she was writing an essay as she was applying to Yale University. And this was such an amazing piece of work that the New York Times published it. It gives a good description of what kids who are at risk go through. She says that so it's in the first person. She says, just as in any game, I endure losses and gains. I can never forget the classic motel that say you have to evacuate by 4 p.m. I didn't know where we would go at 4 p.m. I didn't know what street corner we would sleep on, under what tree we would find a shelter. She said, I learned where $5 would buy enough food to feed a family of 5. I learned about which bus routes I could afford and which neighbors were willing to take me on rides to my classes at 7 a.m. I learned which teachers were able to pick me up because I couldn't afford to take the bus. I moved myself around the game board. I carried my family on my back. During the bitter winter of 2012, I reached a dead end. My family was denied residence in a homeless shelter due to my mother's legal status. Finally, a stranger offered us refuge. Every night, my mother, my sister, toddler brothers, and I arranged ourselves on the kitchen floor and turned on the oven, hoping the warmth would embrace us through the night. What were we going to do? Surely we could not live in front of an oven forever, but I could not see the next move. My mother agreed it would be best for me to stay with a friend for a few days because there I would have meals and a ride to school. I avoided the thought of what would happen to my brothers, and I made my way out to temporary stability. For a few moments, the weight of my family slid off my back, just long enough for me to regain my concentration and my faith in the future. My whole existence is devoted to maximizing my potential. Have you ever heard of some of the students in your school district? I know here in Denver we have a great percentage of kids that are homeless. In order to use Wi-Fi, they go to a neighborhood and keep tapping in to see when they can get on to the internet. They walk around until they can find the internet. They negotiate with hotel managers and ask managers if they could just sleep in the lounge area, in the lounge area. They won't bother anything, she said. We just want to sleep in a warm place. She said, I won't let these circumstances victimize me. I won't let guilt paralyze me. I remain in control, making my moves, winning the game. Attending college is the surest path to victory, and I'm prepared to play as long until I reach the end. This is just one story of what happens with the kids who are at risk. Their public school system is helping them overcome these obstacles as best as they can. The school systems require resources, more resources than those required for students in wealthier districts sometimes. Please support this L15 and share Viviana's story with your colleagues and help them understand what a tragedy it would be if the state were to turn its back on promising students like her. So, colleagues, there are huge numbers of kids at risk. The amount of money that we're talking about is not near enough. It's something, and I hope that once this goes over to the next chamber and comes back, that that amount will even be bigger. I support this.
Senator Hodge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to read from some testimony in the State Education Committee. This was Pam Swanson. She's the superintendent of Adams County School District 50. And she is commenting on why we need to have more funding for at-risk students. She says, from my perspective, there is no higher priority than investing money in our at-risk children to ensure they succeed so they can help their communities grow and prosper. Not only is it the right thing to do, it is the smart thing to do. About 8 in 10 students in my district qualify for free or reduced meals, one of the highest rates in the state. The effects of that statistic are profound. Most of our students enter the school system already behind their peers statewide, and those gaps grow every single year. The fact of the matter is that it simply costs more money to educate at-risk students. So I'm asking you to please support more money for at-risk students.
Senator Newell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to also share from, in my Senate district, I have 5 school districts, and one of them is one of the smallest school districts in the state, and it is one of extreme poverty, and that is the Sheridan School District. Sheridan now has the 2nd highest free and reduced rate in the state and just topped 90% in the district. In fact, the poverty is so high that local churches have partnered to leave weekend backpacks full of food for some of the kids to take home. 25%, that's 1 in every 4 kids, are homeless. The students are homeless. 1/4 of the students are homeless in Sheridan. That is an at-risk student. We have several families in Sheridan now whose homes have been infested with bed bugs. And the problem is that they don't even have the money to have their houses fumigated. And so the kids are coming to school every day with bites, with lice. They have had problems with the washing of their clothes because they don't have even money to buy the laundry soap. So they have some of the teachers literally are taking home their clothes at night, and they bring a change of clothes for the kids in the morning, and they're doing the laundry for their own students. They have also a food bank now that's next to the high school, and it has long lines every single week. I just want to make sure that in the other parts of my district, we have middle income and we have high income. I have also one of the highest income, average income households in the state, just about a mile away. So it is all around us. It's not only in large pockets, it's also in small pockets around our state that these kids who are at risk, to no fault of their own, deserve a high quality education as well. And I hope that we can get this passed today.
Senator Kafalis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, colleagues. I too rise in support of Amendment L015, and I'd like to share two stories, if I may, that were offered to me, and then bring it home to my particular school district. But these are stories from students, children in the Greeley-Weld 6 school district. First story is, I'm from Kenya. I was born in a refugee camp in Kenya. My life in the refugee camp was not good because we did not have enough food or water. We also didn't have enough clothes. We would have to wear the same clothes for months until we could get new clothes. And shoes too. We didn't have enough shoes. We could only buy 2 pairs of shoes for the family, and there were 8 people in my family. The first time I came to the USA, we lived in Georgia. Then we moved to San Diego. It was fun, but we had to move because my mother and father couldn't find work. So we moved to Colorado. I went to 9th and 10th grade in Fort Morgan. I had trouble learning in that school and convinced my mother and father to move me to Greeley so I could graduate. We moved to Greeley and I liked it so much. I have friends who care about me. I cannot wait to graduate and thank my teachers because they don't give up on me. The second story I'd like to share quickly is, I was born in Somalia. Once I got to the U.S., I lived in Minnesota, where I started school. I didn't know how to speak English. The only thing I knew was yes and no. The first day I rode the bus, I didn't know anyone. When I got to school, I went to the office and asked if they could tell me what room to go to. They took me to a room. After an hour, the teacher took me to the library, and she said, go to lunch in 1 hour. I said, okay, but I didn't know what she said, so I sat there for 3 hours and missed lunch. The next day, the teacher took me to lunch. Now I'm in Colorado. The first school I went to in Colorado was Heath Middle School. I am learning English. Now I am at Greeley Central High School. I do my best to do good in school. Colleagues, I know it's a long evening, but I share these personal stories because I think they are relevant, and I think they demonstrate that we have many children that have tremendous capacity to learn and to do well, and that requires a little bit extra attention, and that requires being sensitive to the barriers that these children need to overcome. It is my opinion that the intent of L015 is a good intent because it would distribute or allocate the monies that we are attempting to use for the negative factor. 75% would go for drawing down the negative factor, and 25% would go towards helping schools that are dealing with at-risk students. In my own community in Fort Collins, Poudre School District, we have Putnam Elementary, we have Irish Elementary School, we have Lincoln Middle School, and in those schools, at least 90% of the children are on free and reduced lunch. And therefore, I think this is a proper investment, and this is a proper amendment that is worthy of your support. Thank you.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I will be brief because I know we've definitely given a lot of good opinion on this. There was an article in Education Week, February 18th, and there were a couple comments that I would like to share with you today, because we've talked about just throwing money at the problem, solve it. That alone doesn't. But when that money that has been thrown into helping solve issues and problems is spent well, then it does make a significant difference. So we know that increasing spending per pupil has a positive impact on fourth grade reading results, both for low-income students as well as their non-low-income peers. It's important that all children are given the same kinds of opportunities. But for some children, they start out ahead of the game, and for some, they start out behind. What we have to do is look at the equity of spending and recognize that it does matter. Our superintendents have gotten together and said, we recognize this as a factor. We recognize that there are some districts and some children in poverty that do not have some of the same kinds of opportunities. And so as a result of that, I am very proud of the way that they have come together and said, this is something that we value in Colorado. This is something that we want to aspire to making sure that we are giving more opportunities for students that are from low income, from students that are coming from a home that does not perhaps give them some of those same opportunities. I'll share just very briefly. My 8-year-old granddaughter made the comment to me. She said, "You know, Grandma," she was telling me her spelling list, and she's in 2nd grade. And one of her words was legislate, and one of them was legislator. And I said, "Well, I've got some sentences for you." And so I said, "Man, those are really tough words for a 2nd grader." She said, "Well, Grandma, I'm kind of in the advanced class." I said, "Well, of course you are. You're my granddaughter." We kind of laughed. But one of her comments was, "There are other children in my class." She said, "It's amazing that they just don't know some of these words at all." And I said, "Well, a lot of that is their background. You've come from an opportunity in a family that has given you great opportunities to learn." And so there is a difference. And so a lot of that is a matter of stepping up, catching up, and giving kids an extra opportunity to be given that extra help, that extra intervention to be able to be successful. And in that, I urge and I vote on this amendment.
Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam Chair, colleagues. I've heard a few folks get up here and say, "Well, I'm going to be brief." I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that because I believe in a generous Colorado. And so do 174 of our school districts. They too believe in a generous Colorado. Despite the potential for modest gain for their individual districts, whether it's one of the most wealthy up in mountain communities or one of the most poor in Sheridan, they came together and with near unanimous support said, "Guess what? It's time for us to invest in all of our kids, even those who come from incredibly modest means." I see that many of you are ready to go home to your families, to escape back to our real lives and not stand here in the chamber. But guess what? I will not be brief. And I will not be brief because this is so incredibly important to me and my district. I've shared with many of you the challenges of the kids living in my district. You heard from Pam Swanson. There was a letter read by another senator from Adams County. Pam represents Adams 50, and I represent most of Adams 50 in my Senate district. Nearly 8 in 10 of the students there live at or below the federal poverty line. I'm going to say that again. Nearly 8 out of 10 students in one of the largest school districts, Adams 50, 8 in 10 live at or below the federal poverty line. So let's do simple math. Here in this chamber, we have 35 senators. If we had the same poverty rate, seven of us would be above the poverty line, and the other 28 would be wondering where we would find heat or food or shelter tonight. But guess what? We get to sit here, and this is why I'm not going to be brief. We get to sit here and say, "I'm going to go home to my cozy house and sit with my family with heat on and probably with electricity on and probably with food on the table, although I just had a meal here in the Senate." But guess what? That's not the reality. That is not the reality in my Senate district. Let me take you to the other side of my Senate district, to Adams 14. Exact same reality. The exact same reality. Let's go to the south end of Adams 12 or Mapleton, the other school districts in my Senate district, and guess what? You're going to find 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 students live at or below the federal poverty line. And we expect that folks with no bootstraps will pull themselves up by said bootstraps. That's not the Colorado I know. And that's not a generous Colorado that I believe in either, to say we will not make these investments despite near unanimous support from our superintendents across the state. Rural and urban, suburban, all of them have said, let's commonly invest in the future of these students. And they've asked for a simple split. They've said 75% of the dollars should go to restoring cuts we've made in the past. 25% should go back to restoring funds for at-risk students. I see some of you holding on to your work bags ready to walk out the door, but guess what? That's not the reality for some of the students in my district. They may never hold a computer bag because they don't have technology in their schools. Guess what? They might not ever have the opportunity to stand here in the Senate like I have, coming from a trailer park in my district here to the state capitol. The reason I had that opportunity, the reason I had a future in this chamber, is that once upon a time in a generous Colorado, our state legislature invested in our students. And we can do that again because I'm not that old, so those decisions were made by a Republican legislature to invest heavily in public education. Guess what? That was done with bipartisan support, and guess what? That can happen again today. That we can, through collaboration, agree with 174 school districts and say, guess what? We are the generous Colorado that we believe in. That it's not just about, I'm in it on my own, that I'm in it by myself, and I'll let you struggle to survive. But guess what? That we're in it together. Because when we educate our students, they're going to become more productive members of society. They're going to make more money, which is better for their economic self-sufficiency. And in the process, they're going to be able to contribute more to their community. But if we don't make that kind of modest investment now, when they are in kindergarten, or in first grade, or in second grade, or in third grade, or in fourth grade, we will lose a generation. That is a terrifying concept, the idea that we could totally lose a generation. I can't fathom that we would sit here knowing that in every corner of our state, literally every corner of our state, that there is support for this basic policy, that we help those who have less rather than those who have more. That's one thing I just want to point out. We know that there is a direct correlation between the investment in our at-risk students and their achievement. Among the districts with 1/4 of their students or less qualifying for free and reduced meals, 94% of those schools are rated in the top 2 performance categories. And in stark contrast, while only 38% of our districts with 3/4 or more of their students qualify for free and reduced meals are in that category. That's astounding. That is staggering. And it's because our inequitable formula, one that we've had in law for nearly 20 years, has invested more heavily in wealthier districts while not investing in the same way in those low-income districts. If we believe in that big picture of the American dream, that you work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead, that if you put your nose in the books and you do everything you're asked, that you'll get ahead. And in some school districts, there are no books for you to put your nose into. There are few teachers for you to go and talk to after school and receive support. Why? Why would we not look to make our funding formula more equitable? So colleagues, I will not be brief. I want you to actually look at the data. Take a second to look at the school districts in your corner of the state, in your Senate district or in mine, and let's talk about impact. So I'm going to pull up some. You're more than welcome to come look if you'd like. Here's a picture of what it looks like in my Senate district. Nearly 20,000 students between the 2 school districts, those 2 that are rated near the bottom, Adams 50 and Adams 14. Those students depend on us to make the right decision, so I encourage you, colleagues, to please support L015.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, I do appreciate the discussion on this. Basically, this bill says we're going to allocate this money through the School Finance Act, which has an at-risk factor. It has a concentration factor, which should address the good senator from Commerce City. It deals with a lot of this stuff. I've heard again and again and again from so many parents, from so many students, stop making decisions up there in Denver, who you're going to support, who you're not going to support, how you're going to tip your hands on the scales. To suggest that we're not addressing at risk is it's just completely different from what we're actually doing here. This proposal adds basically a further premium on top of that to focus on at risk, and I think we have a fundamental disagreement on whether or not we do it equally through the formula or we specifically highlight these 1 areas. I ask for your support. Let's do it equally throughout the formula, and also join me in supporting. Let's really take a look at how we're doing the formula. I believe we can all agree that we need some changes to that formula. Let's focus on changing this in the formula rather than us constantly picking different buckets and we're saying we're going to allocate this here and this there. Let's allocate this directly to the districts through the formula and let them spend it how they will.
Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the bill sponsor for raising this point. But for me, I wanted to just highlight a question, which is, what does it say about our state priorities that the formula we've been using for nearly 20 years systematically distributes more money to wealthier districts? On average, and controlling for the size factor, our school finance formula provides $2,600 more per pupil in districts with high wealth than districts of the same size with high poverty levels. And even with our tightly constrained state budget, we are sending more state dollars, more state money, an average of $1,500 per pupil to high wealth districts as compared with their same size cohorts with high poverty. That's why this is necessary. Yes, we have a school funding formula, and yes, there is an at-risk factor, and yes, despite all of that, we are pumping more and more money into wealthy districts at the expense of our low-income students.
Is there any further discussion on L015? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of L015. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The noes have it, and the amendment fails. Are we to the bill? Which senator first? Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to say that I don't have any more amendments.
You're awesome. Do 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 do. Hello. Oh, there is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read L011?
Amendment L011 to Senate Bill 267 by Senator Kerr, member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L011. In statute right now, we have a plan for almost fully funding full-day kindergarten. It at least takes us from the 0.58 that we fund kindergarten at right now up to 0.75. I won't talk too much about other bills which may or may not have moved us in the direction of funding full-day kindergarten, which perhaps this amendment might have been based on a little bit. But unlike the bill I'm not going to talk about, this doesn't actually move any money. It sets up a plan, it updates a plan for fully funding full-day kindergarten. And you'll see, as you look at the amendment, the language that's in statute already says things like, for the 2009-10 budget year, $60 million will be allocated to go to full-day, to kindergarten students. And it goes on for 5 years. It puts in place, which we already have in statute again, it put in place a 5-year plan from going from the 0.58 to 0.75 funding for kindergartners. This amendment would update that statute and actually bring it up to future years. You'll see that even the last year that's in statute was 2013-14. So this is in stat. We had in statute, go pull out our statute books right here and open it up, and you will find this 5-year plan of increasing funding for kindergarten. And you'll see in here, it says, for each budget year, the General Assembly intends to appropriate the following amounts. Well, the General Assembly voted to put this language in there and yet never put the money in to actually fund the full-day kindergarten. A little thing called the Great Recession kind of got in the way there. You'll see back 2009, 2010, when we were making drastic cuts to education, not fully funding full-day kindergarten, which we should be doing. So This amendment, L011, does not spend a dime, does not raise any money, does not move any money. It says it is our intent as the General Assembly that moving out, not even this next fiscal year, but the following fiscal year, that we will raise the percentage that we're paying for kindergartners from 50.58 up to 0.65, and then increase that by about 13-14% until the year 2021 budget year, where we will be fully funding kindergartners. So just for those of you who have forgotten, as I've talked about this before, in the state of Colorado, when a kindergartner goes to school, while their older brother or sister in first grade or second grade or ninth grade or 12th grade get 100% PPR, get the full amount that we give to students here in this state. The kindergartner, the 5-year-old, is only worth 58% of their older brother and sister in one of those other grades. 0.58 is what we are paying for kindergartners. So this amendment increases that, doesn't do it all at once. And again, it doesn't actually move any money. It says this is our intent. And if you don't like putting language in place that just says the legislative intent is to do this without actually putting the money behind it, well, this language is already on the books. This language is already there. It's just already out of date. So we are keeping the intent. We're still keeping the words exactly the same. For each budget year, the General Assembly intends to appropriate the following amounts to increase annually the appropriation to be used by districts to provide full-day kindergarten programs. That language is already there. We are simply updating it into future years rather than in the past where we already didn't even follow what was in statute. So if you're worried that we're spending money that we don't have, if you're worried that we're taking money out of the state education fund, if you're worried about stewardship, don't have to worry about that with this amendment. This amendment simply updates years, and it puts it into the future saying that this is what we intend to do. I ask for an aye vote on L011.
Senator Neville.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm glad we don't have to worry about stewardship anymore. So, I appreciate the senator from Jefferson County taking that off our worry list. What I'd like to point out, though, is we have an opportunity. Each district has an opportunity to make decisions within the district. For the good senator from Jefferson County has $22 million that it can choose to decide how to use them in the most proper manner. And those people that are elected to represent on the school board in Jefferson County can make that decision. So I urge a no vote.
Is there any further discussion on L011? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of L011. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Division. Okay. No, you withdrew. You withdraw. Okay, all right, I misheard it. So we're going to go back to so we're voting on L011. All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. The noes have it, and the amendment fails. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read L016?
Amendment L016, Senate Bill 267 by Senator Merrifield, amend the appropriations
Senator
committee report date.
Merrifield.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just hoping that maybe we're wearing you down and your generosity bone is getting a little achy. some of the previous senators talked about the at-risk children, and really with some heartrending stories, and I'll be very quick. So we promised we'd buy down the negative factor. Currently, we only have 25 million set aside. This amendment, which I move, Amendment 016, takes 75 million out of the state education fund, adds it to the 25 million we've already set aside, totals to 100 million, splits it in the same way as the superintendents pleaded with us to do. They want it regardless of the amount that we provide for them. They are willing to spend 25% of it on at-risk children and 75% to reduce the negative factor, and that's what this amendment would do. And maybe by now you're ready to vote yes on an amendment. So I urge you to do so.
Any further discussion on L016? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask for no vote.
Is there any further discussion on L016? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of L016. All in favor say aye. Okay, a division has been called.
That's what was in that cup. It was very yellow.
Right behind me. All right, I think we're ready, Madam Chair. What's the wait for? Let's do this. We're just waiting for Senator Scott to come upstairs.
A division has been requested, period. Will all those in the chamber not entitled to vote, please be seated? Question mark. The motion before the body is the adoption of Amendment L016 to Senate Bill 15-267, Senate Floor Amendment, second reading by Senator Merrifield, that reads, amend the Appropriations Committee report dated April 17, 2015, all those in favor of the motion, which is to adopt L016, please stand. Okay, please be seated. Oh, I'm sorry. No, not yet. Jerry. Senator Sonnenberg. Okay, please be seated. All those opposed, please stand, period. Once again, all those opposed, please stand. The motion fails. No. With that, we are back to the bill, Senate Bill 267. Is there, I'm afraid to ask, any further discussion of Senate Bill 267? Seeing none, the motion before the, I can't see in that direction. The motion before the body is the adoption of Senate Bill 267. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and Senate Bill 267 is passed. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Bill 1045?
House Bill 1045 by Representative Wright and Senator Crowder concerning the amount a veteran must pay to enter state parks.
Senator Crowder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1045, and I also move the State and Veterans Military Affairs Committee report and Appropriations Committee report.
To the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, L003 was a strike blow. This bill come to me from the House, and basically what it said on the onset was the day before Veterans Day they would open up the parks for free. Well, as you're aware, I'm sure you are, that the Veterans Day is November 11th, and I didn't believe that anybody wanted to camp out during then. So the committee report, we did a strike below, and I want to acknowledge the chair of the Veterans Committee as well as the committee because they were extremely helpful on this. And the strike below, basically what it does is open this up for the month of August, and I was very pleased with that. So that is basically the committee report from the State and Veterans and Military Affairs.
The motion before the is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee report. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the committee report is adopted. To the Appropriations Committee report.
Okay, the Appropriation Committee report come out positive also, and it would be an agreement between the general fund for $150,000 and the this, what it does is reimburse the state for the month of August that we're using their facilities, and that's basically all the report does.
Is there any further discussion of the Appropriations Committee report? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of the Appropriations Committee report. All in favor say aye. Senator Crowder, you might want to say aye. Aye?
Aye.
All opposed say no. The aye has it, and the report is adopted. Senator Crowder, to your bill, please.
Okay, the bill basically just opens up state parks for the veteran for the month of August. We felt that between myself, the committee, and the Parks and Wildlife, felt that August would be a satisfactory month that would not overload the park. And what it does is just set up a $2 sticker that identifies a veteran, so he would have interest. It's a one-time deal. And that's basically the bill, Madam Chair, and it's a very simple bill. It's a bill for the veterans, and I urge a yes vote on it.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the Senator Kefales.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The good senator from the Valley, does this include family members of veterans?
Senator Crowder.
It's actually by the car, by the vehicle. So that if the veteran is driving the vehicle or has access to that vehicle, that sticker would be given to him for his car for that family.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the motion before the body is the adoption of House Bill 1045. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the bill passes. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Bill 1284?
House Bill 1284 by Representatives Winter and Roop and Senators Grantham and Hodge concerning measures to enhance program efficiency for shared photovoltaic energy generation facilities.
Senator Scheffel, Majority Leader Scheffel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee lay over House Bill 1284 to April 24.
The motion before the body is to lay over House Bill 1284 to April 24. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion passes. Majority Leader Scheffel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
The motion before the body is to rise and report. Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it, and the motion passes. Thank you. The Senate will come back to order. Thank you, Madam President. The committee has met and had a number of bills under consideration. Mr. Majors, would you please read the report?
April 23rd, 2015. Madam President, your committee of the whole basically reports that in consideration the following tax bills being second reading thereof makes following recommendations are on. Senate Bill 222 is amended, Senate Bill 257 is amended, Senate Bill 267 is amended, passed on second reading in order and gross place a calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 1186, House Bill 1134 is amended, House Bill 1045 is amended, passed on second reading in order to revise place a calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 141 and House Bill 1284 laid over until April 24, 2015, retaining their place on the calendar. Senate Bill 233 referred to the Committee on Legislative Counsel.
Senator Roberts. Thank you, Madam President. I move for the adoption of the report. The motion before us is adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? Oh. Not that I'm in a hurry. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair, or Madam President, excuse me. Before,
$2.
Happy to pay the $2. Madam President, I do have a question for the Chair of the Committee of the Whole with regard to the second bill. Wondering if she would mind explaining what the second bill was on that motion.
She went home. Is there any other discussion? So the motion before us is the adoption of the Committee of the Whole with an amendment. There is an amendment. Mr. Majors, please read amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole 1.
Committee of the Whole Amendment 1 to Senate Bill 257. Senators Holbert, Neville, Marble, Merrifield, Woods, and Todd moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole show that the following Hill floor amendment L033 to Senate Bill 257 did not pass, and that Senate Bill 257 as amended did pass. Amend the Holbert floor amendments.
Holbert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the Holbert, Neville, T, Marble, Merrifield, Woods, and Todd amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole.
That will be after you pay $4. Oh, wait, he gave me chocolate, $2. Okay.
Sorry, Madam.
Go ahead, Senator Holbert.
Pay now.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, I move the Holbert, Neville, T, Marble, Merrifield, Woods, and Todd amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Is there any discussion, Senator Holbert?
Yes, this amendment will address the question that we had earlier about districts using park data. The original amendment respects, I think, the intent, the request of parents statewide that we not use that, at least during this transition period. Right now, we're on a current timeout period for teachers and districts. Earlier, we adopted an amendment that extends that one more year for each and would ask for your aye vote on this amendment to show that an earlier amendment to that condition failed. So again, a yes vote on this is a no vote to park data, and that's what I'm asking for, a yes vote on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, when we talk about listening to what people have been saying to us, they say again and again and again, stop telling us how to do things, stop telling us what to do in Denver, let us make these decisions locally. And so this bill says nope, you're not allowed to use data. We don't trust the districts. You're not allowed to use the data to do your assessments. So, colleagues, whether we use it or whether we don't, I think it's time for us to recognize this notion of local control needs to take a far greater prominence in how we make decisions up here. A vote for this is to say, one size fits all. We know what data is good data and what data is bad data. We know what districts should or shouldn't be doing without actually really looking into how they incorporate it into their accountability structures. This is a vote for this amendment, or a vote for this cow, is a vote against letting local districts make their own decisions.
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, that's $2.
Madam President, the good news is I have a cow to sweep the Senate cash fund into the state ed fund, which will cover our $200 million by the end of the session.
It's another $2.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Madam President. So I would also ask for a no vote on this. I don't see a reason to take all of the local control out of the local control bill that you're trying to pass. What I think is more surprising is the sponsors on this amendment from Jefferson County and Douglas County. I think you should realize your amendment, if it gets on, will make the current practices in your districts illegal. Your current teacher evaluation systems will now be illegal under your amendment. So your locally elected school boards who have been put in place to run their school district, you are now stepping over them and saying you can no longer do the locally designed evaluation system that you want to do. And more than that, the only thing I think people would dislike more than having to take the tests is say, no, let's make everyone take the tests. Let's just make sure we can never use the data from the tests once they're taken. That seems like maybe the toughest of both worlds. So we've already said they don't have to use it if they don't want to. To do this amendment would say no district in the state is allowed to, even if they do want to, and districts that are currently doing it have spent time and money and effort to build an evaluation system. You're now telling them that evaluation system is, in the words of this law, illegal. I'd ask for a no vote on this cow.
Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam President. That was right, yes. I ask for an aye vote on the amendment. All the stakeholders, including the 1202 Task Force, recommend that we take a break in 2015 and hold a hold harmless year for districts. So if this CAL passes, it will remove the pressure on the system by giving districts and educators a break from the use of unproven, unreliable test scores. And it makes sure that we in the General Assembly are getting up-to-date information on when park data will be ready to use in accountability. Those are some reasons why I asked you to vote aye on this CAL amendment.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't understand evaluations in Jeffco, but I do stand with the school board in Douglas. We do, under this amendment, if it passes, and my school board cannot use park data in this next year, that's okay, because they can use local assessment data, growth data. They can use data. They're just not going to use the park data. And we're not using that now because they don't have that. So I would ask your support, please, of this amendment. I don't understand the use of the word illegal, but I'm confident that my school district can and will move forward if this amendment passes and they do not use data that the parents don't want their kids participating in driving to us, and frankly an increasing number of parents don't want used in evaluating their teachers. So again, I ask for an aye vote on the amendment.
Any further discussion? Senator Johnston.
Thanks, Madam President. Last comment.
$2.50.
I just want to clarify, I think the facts are important. The 1202 Commission never said, please prohibit us by law from being able to use this data. What they said is, give us flexibility about whether or not we choose to use this data, which is what this amendment did, was give them flexibility. You are now undoing that flexibility by telling them what they can or cannot do. What they explicitly said is, don't tell us what we can or cannot do, give us flexibility. A yes vote on this goes back to telling them what they can or cannot do, which I think is the opposite of their request. I'd ask for a no vote.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam President. And colleagues, just I guess to follow that up, we've said again and again, we want to trust our local school districts. We want to trust our local school boards. If your local school board doesn't want to use this, if it, for whatever reason, hasn't been incorporated, don't use it. Great. The way the bill is passed, it gives that complete flexibility. What this would now say is for those who already have accountability systems that plan and ratings measures that plan on using this data, we've now said, basically an unfunded mandate, you've got to go back and you've got to come up with something new. We're not even going to give you the option to make decisions for yourselves locally. I agree with the sponsors who have said, I trust my school district. And I'm asking that we trust all of our school districts and let them make that decision rather than us having a one-size-fits-all policy for all of them, banning them from using data that they may or may not deem useful. I ask for no vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before the body is the adoption of Committee of the Whole Amendment 1 to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Are there any no votes? Senator Aguilar, Senator Cafalis, slowly. Senator John, Senator Cook, Senator Crowder, Senator Martinez-Humenick, Senator Hill, Senator Hodge, Senator Newell, Senator Johnston. Please add the president. With a vote of 24 ayes, 11 noes, 0 absent or excused, the amendment is adopted. Mr. Majors, would you please read Committee of the Whole? Oh, gotcha. Okay. Mr. Majors, would you please read the amendment to
Now we're back to
267? Go ahead.
Committee of the Whole Amendment 1 to Senate Bill 267. Senator Merrifield moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole show that the following Merrifield floor amendment L016 to Senate Bill 267 did pass, and that Senate Bill 267 as amended did pass. Amend the Appropriations Committee report dated April 17, 2015, page 1, strike lines 2 through 6, and substitute section 2.
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam President. This is, am I correct? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Madam President. I bring you Senator Merrifield.
Oh, no. Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And for a second verse of Kumbaya, Madam President.
$2.
You might remember, because it's just been a few minutes ago, that I moved an amendment that would have provided $100 million, 75 to buy down the negative factor and 25 for that risk. And we had some really heart-moving testimony about how desperately our poorer districts are in need of this additional at-risk funding, and how we promised to start to buy down the negative factor. And this is a legitimate use of state education funds. That's why it's called state education funds. So I would ask for your approval of Cal Amendment 001.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam President. You might remember, because it was just a few minutes ago, vote no.
Any further discussion? Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. With due respect to my colleague from Grand Junction, I won't belabor the point, ask for a no vote.
We should have done that, Mr. Chair.
Oh, Senator Holbert, I hear you owe $4.
You said chair. This is going to be real good for business.
Any further discussion to Committee of the Whole Amendment 1 to Senate Bill 267? Seeing none, the question before the body is the adoption of Amendment 1 to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Are there any no votes? Senator Holbert, Senator Neville, Senator Lambert, Senator Crowder, Senator Woods, Senator Lundberg, Senator Sheffel, Members, we need to keep it quiet, or I have to speak even closer to the microphone. Senator Marble, Senator Cook, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Hill, Senator, what's his name? Oh, right, Scott. Senator Balmer, Senator Martinez-Humenick, Senator Neville, Senator Grantham, Senator Sonnenberg, President Cadman. Now I'm really confused. Which am I? President? Please add the president. With 18 ayes, 17 ayes, 18 noes, that amendment fails. Mr. Majors, would you please read Committee of the Whole Amendment 2?
Committee of the Whole Amendment 2 to Senate Bill 267. Senators Merrifield and Johnston move to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, I was just counting some votes on the other side of the aisle, and a couple people said to me, we like that last amendment, we just wish it had been a little bit bigger. We just wish you'd made a little bit more courageous of an investment in K-12, and so I feel like we should bring you another option to do that, which is what Cal 2 is, go big or go home. This is our amendment to put $200 million in the State Ed Fund into K-12 to make sure we can make those dollars available now, and we would ask for an aye vote.
Senator Johnston, would you move the amendment, please?
Yes, I would also like to move Cal Amendment 2. We would like to move Cal Amendment 2 to the Committee of the Whole report.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam President. The option, unfortunately, was a false dichotomy that you could go big or go home. In this case, it's a go big this year and go home next year because there's a huge increase in the negative factor. Please vote no.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before the body is the adoption of Committee of the Whole Amendment 2 to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Are there any no votes? President Cadman, Majority Leader Sheffel, Senator Lundberg, Senator Woods, Senator Holbert, Senator Lambert, Senator Crowder, Senator Balmer, Senator Scott, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Hill, Senator Cook, Senator Marble, Senator Sonnenberg, Senator Stedman, Senator Hill, I think I got you, but we'll get you again. Senator Martinez-Humenick, Senator Neville, Senator Grantham. Please add the president. With 17 ayes, 18, it's ever changing. With 16 ayes, 19 noes, that amendment fails.
Yep.
Mr. Majors, would you please read Committee of the Whole Amendment 3?
Committee of the Whole Amendment 3 to House Senate Bill 267. Senators Merrifield and Johnston move to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole so that the following Johnston
Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam President. This is our amendment on honoring the requests of the 174 superintendents across the state who said we ought to have a fundamental commitment to equity in any school finance arrangement. This separates it as they asked us, where 75% of the dollars go straight across the top to all districts, 25% go to at-risk students in every district where they are. I will remind you this is actually a lower percentage of funding to at-risk students that would go in the normal formula, because the normal formula has a concentration factor which multiplies it. So this is even less of an investment in at-risk students than the regular formula, but it is more than the current bill, which has zero investment in at-risk kids. Turn it over to my co-sponsor.
Senator Johnston, first, would you please move the amendment and don't want to like it to move it, just move it.
Thank you, Madam President. I was so moved by the amendment, I forgot to move the actual amendment. So I move Committee of the Whole Amendment 3 and ask for an aye vote.
Thank you. Senator Merrifield.
Thank you, Madam President. So this is $6.25 million for at-risk. And this is a pittance of the need, but at least we dedicate that much to poor children across the state. And once again, it's exactly what the superintendents have asked us to do. With this is not we're not asking for additional money. We're not taking it out of the state education funding. We're just asking that you agree with us to follow the will of the 174 superintendents and split that funding as they have requested. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam President and colleagues. I guess the request in running this amendment was to ask for equity, which is why I ask you to vote no on this. We have $25 million equitably distributed throughout the school finance formula. Ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Senator Holbert.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I too ask for a no vote on the amendment. Truly appreciate the bipartisan work here in the chamber and also conversations with folks over in the House. I wish we had more. We've talked about ways to have more than 25 million, but really want to point to the bipartisan work of the JBC and also now in the Education Committee to move forward on a very simple bill with the 25 million. Let's please not carve that up and respectfully ask for a no vote on the amendment.
Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Madam President. Have any of you actually met a superintendent before? Have any of you actually met more than one superintendent at the same time? You might have noticed that superintendents are not very much alike a lot of the times, and they don't think alike, they don't talk alike, they don't make decisions alike and agree very much. And when 98% of the superintendents in this state, 174 out of 178, 98% of all the superintendents agree on something and sign a letter agreeing on something, I think it behooves the 35 of us, the 100% of the 35 of us, to listen to the 98% of the 178 of them. Please vote aye on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion from Senator Hill?
Thank you, Madam President. Have you ever met a student? Have you ever met two students? Have you ever met 855,000 students together? Let's treat them all equally. Vote no.
Is there any? Senator Johnston. Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam President. That would be appropriate if the School Finance Act that the previous speaker is proposing here doesn't actually include variables that treat all students differently. The current formula that you're asking to vote to uphold right now in this bill is a variable that actually more profoundly weights at-risk students than the proposal we're giving you. Your refilling of the negative factor is refilling a formula that currently not only prioritizes at-risk students, it says, which you all don't like, some of you don't like, that the concentration factor, which is currently in law, which you're keeping in law, means that, as the senators here have remarked, a at-risk student in Jefferson County currently does not receive as much money as an at-risk student in Denver, because the concentration factor is higher in Denver than it is in Jefferson County or in Commerce City, which there's oodles of research to support the fact that it's harder to teach a class of 25 kids where 24 of them came in without breakfast than it is to teach a class of 25 kids where one came in without breakfast. But the current school finance formula already says if you happen to be a student in the Eastern Plains, you are actually worth much more in the school finance formula than a student in Denver or Jeffco. If you're in a very small district, if you are at risk, if you have any set of additional needs like English language learners, this formula already provides additional funding and recognizes that all students are not made equally and are not funded equally. So I don't think it's possible to say, let's support a school finance act that funds every school the same. This finance act does not do that. All we're asking to do is not create a school finance act that selectively refuses to acknowledge the one part of that need that is most significant, which is students living in poverty. So I would be happy to redesign the entire school finance act if you want to do that. Some of us spent a couple years of our lives working on that. But I think absent that change, we ought to at least have a Band-Aid to make sure we don't leave the least among us served the least well.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before the body is the adoption of Amendment 3 to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Are there any no votes? President Cadman, Senator Holbert, Senator Hill, Majority Leader Scheffel, Senator Lundberg, Senator Woods, Senator Lambert, Senator Neville, Senator Marble, Senator Cook, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Scott, Senator Martinez-Humanic, Senator Crowder, Senator Sonnenberg, Senator Grantham, Senator Balmer. Please add the President. With 17 ayes, 18 noes, the amendment is lost. Mr. Majors, would you please read Committee of the Whole Amendment 4?
Committee of the Whole Amendment 4 to Senate Bill 267. Senator Kerr moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole. Show that the following
Kerr.
Kerr.
Thank you, Madam President. So if you are tired of amendments moving millions of dollars around, if you're looking for that way that you can support full-day kindergarten students in kindergarten, and actually make sure that I move W.004,
Is there any
otherwise
further
known as.
discussion?
If you are ready for an amendment that all 35 of us should be able to get behind, because it doesn't move a penny. What it does do is actually update the words in this little red book. If you haven't seen this before, these are our statutes. And in our statutes right now, we have an entire section talking about full-day kindergarten funding. It's section 2254-131. Title is Full-Day Kindergarten Funding. Now, here's the thing about full-day kindergarten funding, is that if you are a student in Colorado in kindergarten, and you are going to kindergarten, and you have an older sibling who's in first grade, just a year older than you, that older sibling is funded at 100% of an FTE, at their PPR, at the amount that the state pays for students to go to school, 100%. But if you are in kindergarten, a year younger, you're 5 years old, you get only 58% of what your older sibling is getting. Now, this amendment doesn't solve that problem. But what it does do is solve the problem that in our statutes under section 2254-131, which talks about full-day kindergarten funding, and has in here that says for the 09-10 budget year, for the 10-11 budget year, for the 11-12 budget year, it had a plan in place to increase full-day kindergarten funding, a 5-year plan to get up to 0.75. So we are going to raise full-day kindergartners from 0.58 to 0.75. But those are the words that are in statute right now. Do we have the money to do it in the School Finance Act? Do we have it in our general fund? Do we have it in the budget to fix this problem right now? No, we don't. But we do have the power to fix these words and at least put the intent, which says it is the intent of the General Assembly to increase annually the appropriation to be used. The General Assembly intends to appropriate. It at least updates the words that are in our statute books. Because if we want to talk about equality, if we want to talk about equity, and we're talking about a 6-year-old going to first grade, getting 100% of the funding, and their younger sibling, only a year younger, is only getting 58% of the funding to go to school, meaning that for the vast majority of districts in this state, the vast majority of parents, the vast majority of students who actually go to full-day kindergarten, it is their parents then that are having to pay that extra 42% to make sure their kids can actually go to full-day kindergarten. That is why, if you're tired of all those other amendments, this is the one we can all come together on. This is the one that should unite us, that whole kumbaya thing. Please vote for Cal 4.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before the body, Senator Hobart.
Tricky. Thank you, Madam President. Still have my sign here. Do ask for a no vote on the current amendment 004, or the Kerr amendment to the Committee of the Whole, report of the Committee of the Whole. Let's recognize that in some districts, full-day K might be something a majority of voters, taxpayers, parents are asking for, and in other districts, it's not. We have a limited amount of money, and as with the prior amendment, I just ask that we not start designating how money would be spent, and ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Is there any further? Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me just reiterate here. No money is actually moved with this. This language is already in statute, but it's more than 5 years old. Let's just update the language that's in our statute books. If we have words that mean anything in the books that tell about, that explain our laws, they should actually give an intent that's for now and into the future, not the past. Let's update our language. It doesn't move a penny. It doesn't move a dime from one place to another. It shows our intent to increase funding for full-day kindergarten. Please vote yes on this Cal.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, you heard that this amendment actually doesn't do anything. It doesn't allocate resources. It doesn't move things around. For that, I just ask you to vote no.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question before the body is the adoption of Amendment 4 to the report of the Committee of the Whole. Are there any no votes? Senator Stedman, Senator Hill, Senator Cook, Senator Scheffel, Senator Hobart, Mr. President, Senator Lundberg, Senator Marble, Senator Scott, Senator Balmer, Senator Baumgardner, Senator Martinez-Humenick, Senator Woods. I thought I had you, Senator Scheffel, but Senator Lambert, Senator Crowder, Senator Sonnenberg, Senator Neville, Senator Grantham. Please add the President. With 16 ayes, 19 noes, that amendment is lost. There are no further amendments. Senator Roberts renews her motion for the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report. Are there any no votes? With a vote of 35 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent or excused, the Committee of the Whole report is adopted. Oh dear.
Start reading from right there. Read this all the way down.
Senate Bill 15-222 as amended. Senate Bill 15-257 as amended. Senate Bill 15-267 as amended. Passed on second reading and ordered, engrossed, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. House Bill 15-1186, House Bill 15-1134 as amended, House Bill 15-1045 as amended, passed on second reading and ordered, revised, and placed on the calendar for third reading and final passage. Senate Bill 15-141, House Bill 15-1284 laid over until April 24, 2015 and retaining their place on the calendar. Senate Bill 15-233, referred to the Committee on Legislative Counsel.
So, yeah, so do you want to keep going?
No.
Do you want to keep going?
No.
Okay, you sure?
Yeah.
You can.
I've got plenty of mic time.
All right. Consideration of resolutions. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title of Senate Joint Resolution?
Senate Joint Resolution 20 by Senators Baumgartner and Sonnenberg and Representatives Vehil and Quorum concerning the recognition of the importance of coal to the Colorado economy.
Majority Leader Scheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate lay over Senate Joint Resolution 21 to April 27.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. That motion fails. Mr. Majors, let's have it.
Senate Joint Resolution 21 by Senators Baumgartner and Sonnenberg and Representatives Vehil and Quorum concerning the recognition of the importance of coal to the Colorado economy.
Senator Sonnenberg.
Can try.
You voted for it. Senator Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, I don't believe I did vote for it, so I would move that Senate Bill or Senate Concurrent Senate Resolution, Joint Resolution 21 lay over till Monday.
You have heard the motion. The motion before us is to lay over Senate Joint Resolution 21 to Monday, whatever Monday that is. Would you care to pick a Monday?
Or 27.
There are 52 choices. Hey, you did this to yourselves, people. We have a motion. I think we're in the middle of a motion. Senator Sonnenberg, would you like to clarify your amendment?
I move the lay over till Monday, April 27.
We'll still be here. You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senate Joint Resolution 21 will lay over until April 27. Consideration of governor's appointments consent calendar. Mr. Majors, would you please read all of the governor's appointments on the consent calendar?
Members of the Board of Mortgage Loan Originators for terms expiring August 10th, 2018, Charles Patterson Buzzmore of Grand Junction, Colorado, licensed mortgage loan originator appointed. Fred Joseph of Denver, Colorado, member of the public at large appointed.
Majority Leader Scheffel.
Thank you, Mr. President. To move the Senate confirm the governor's appointments listed on the consideration of governor's appointments consent calendar, which includes members of the Board of Mortgage Loan Originators.
There's been a move to sever. Mr. Majority Leader, we'd like to take those in two motions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Move that the consideration of governor's appointments on the consent calendar be severed to consider Mr. Moore of Grand Junction and Mr. Joseph of Denver in two separate votes.
Is there further discussion? The motion before the body is the consideration of governor's appointments consent, two separate votes. The first one is the confirmation of Charles Patterson Buzzmore. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, with 35 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 0 excused, Charles Patterson Buzzmore is confirmed on the Board of Mortgage Loan Originators. The motion before us is now the consideration of governor's appointments consent confirmation of Fred Joseph. Is there further discussion? Seeing none, the president will be recorded as a 17C. Are there any no votes? With 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, and 1 17C, Fred Joseph is confirmed on the Board of Mortgage Loan Originators. Introduction of bills.
Senate Bill 275 by Senators Lambert and Carroll and Representatives Holding and Young concerning protections for information given to members of the General Assembly in the course of official duties.
Senate Bill 275 is assigned to the Committee on Local Government. Signing of bills.
April 23, 2015, the President signed House Bills 1136, 1203, 1215, 1218, 1220, 1239, and 1255.
Committee reports.
April 23, 2015, Mr. President, the Committee on Health and Human Services had under consideration as at a hearing on the following appointments, recommends the appointments be placed on the consent calendar and confirmed. Members of the Medical Services Board for terms expiring July 1, 2018, Patricia L. Givens, DHA, EDM, BNRN of Denver, Colorado, and unaffiliated from the 1st Congressional District with knowledge of medical assistance programs reappointed. Amanda Ann Moore of Westminster, Colorado, Republican from the 7th Congressional District with knowledge of medical assistance programs appointed. April 23, 2015, Committee on Finance, after consideration of the Mayor's Committee recommends the following Senate Bill 260 be referred favorably to the Committee on Appropriations. April 23, 2015, Committee on Finance, after consideration of the Mayor's Committee recommends the following House Bill 1249 be amended as follows and as so amended be referred to the Committee on Appropriations with a favorable recommendation.
I should have been recorded as present but not voting on that confirmation. No, we severed it. It was two separate votes. We only have to reconsider the one vote. The Senate will stand in a short recess. The Senate will come back to order. Will the choir please gather while we still have Senator Scott in attendance? This was going to be absentia.
All right.
We would have been singing to a gold cone with no head attached. Please proceed to the aisle. You know that one, right?
Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear Senator Scott and Ray. Happy birthday to you.
Announcements. Senator Newell. Bring it. No. Rescinded. Introductions of guests. Senator Todd. Apparently from the Valley. Senator Grantham.
Thank you, Mr. President. We do have appropriations tomorrow, 8 o'clock, and including the 12 bills that are on the printed calendar. You should have gotten the sheet with the additional 6 bills. We will have 18 up tomorrow, minus 1. So be there, 8 o'clock. See you in the morning.
Further announcements. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. We will not be leaving the desk open.
Yeah.
Move that the Senate adjourn to 9 a.m. Friday, April 24th.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. The Senate will be adjourned until 9 a.m. Friday, April 24th.